Leave. You don't want to be here when they come back. Those were the first words a stranger ever spoke to Emily Walker that actually sounded like the truth. She was 18 years old, alone on a dark Arizona highway at 4 in the morning, and the man bleeding on the asphalt in front of her had his hands tied behind his back. Every instinct she had screamed at her to walk away. She stayed anyway, and that decision changed everything she thought she knew about her father, her past, and why she was still alive. This story moves you. Please subscribe to our channel and follow Emily's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The temperature on that stretch of Arizona highway, somewhere between Tucson and nothing, had dropped below 40 degrees. Emily Walker had not slept in 2 days. Boots had a hole in the left sole that let the cold blacktop breathe right through into her heel, and she had learned months ago to stop noticing it the same way she had learned to stop noticing hunger after the first hour, or loneliness after the first week, or the sound of her own name, which nobody had used in so long it had started to feel like something that belonged to a different girl. She was 18 years old. She had been living on the road for 14 months. The one rule she lived by, the rule that had kept her breathing when a dozen other situations should have ended her, was simple enough to say in 4 words: never stop for strangers, not for men who offered rides, not for women who smiled too wide, not for anyone who pulled over slowly on a dark road and rolled down their window and called out to her in a voice that was trying very hard to sound kind. She had learned that lesson 3 times before she stopped needing to learn it again. The first time she had been naive. The second time she had been desperate. The third time she had been both, and she had run 2 miles through a cornfield in the middle of November to get away from what that desperation had almost cost her. After that, no more strangers. She walked with her head down, her backpack straps pulled tight, one hand always loose near the side pocket where she kept a folding knife and a small canister of pepper spray. She did not use earbuds. She did not look at her phone unless she needed the flashlight. She counted her steps sometimes, not because it helped, but because numbers were honest. Numbers did not make promises they could not keep. On that night, she was counting. She had reached somewhere past 4,000 when she saw the light. Not headlights, not a gas station. Something lower to the ground, orange and flickering, the kind of light that came from something that had recently been moving fast and was now very, very still. She stopped walking. The logical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive for 14 months, said, keep moving. That is not your problem. Whatever happened over there happened before you arrived, and it will still be happening after you leave. And none of it has anything to do with you. The other part of her brain, the part that she had been trying to silence since the night she found Father's apartment empty and his phone disconnected, and a handwritten note on the kitchen table that said nothing, except, I'm sorry. Emmy, that part of her brain, said something different. That part said, look. She looked. The motorcycle was on its side about 30 feet off the shoulder of the road. The orange light she had seen was coming from somewhere near the engine, not a fire, not yet, but close enough to the smell of gasoline that her stomach clenched. Beside the motorcycle, sitting with his back against a concrete mile marker, was a man. Big man, broad shoulders, a leather vest she could see even from the road. Dark hair, matted on one side where something had hit him or where he had hit the asphalt. Boots were heavy, and his hands were behind his back. Emily stared. She could not see his face clearly, but she could see that he was watching her with the kind of focus that men use when they are trying very hard not to show that they are afraid. Not afraid of her. Afraid of something else. Afraid of something that might be coming back. Leave, he said. His voice carried across the cold air with almost no effort, low and even like a man who was used to being heard. You don't want to be here when they come back. Emily did not move. Serious, he said, walk away, right now. Do not come over here. Are your hands tied, she asked. A pause. Yes. Is that your bike? Yes. Is the gas about to catch? Another pause, shorter this time. Probably. Emily stood on the shoulder of the road and stared at the orange flicker near the engine of his motorcycle and thought about the 3 times she had not walked away when she should have, the one time she had, and the way that one time still sat in chest sometimes at 3 in the morning, like a piece of glass that had never been removed. Don't, the man said. His voice had changed just slightly. Not softer, but more honest. I mean it. These are not people you want to know about. You walk away right now and you don't know anything, and they've got no reason to touch you. I don't walk away. He looked at her for a long moment. Then God help us both. Emily took her hand away from her side pocket and walked toward him. Later, she would not be able to fully explain why. She had run through the explanation in her head dozens of times over the following weeks, trying to find the logical thread that made sense of it, some calculation she had made about risk versus reward, some reading of the situation that told her this man was not dangerous. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler and harder to defend. He tried to protect her. He had hands tied behind his back and a possible gas fire 3 feet away, and he had used what might have been some of his last sentences to tell her to leave. And Emily Walker, who had spent 14 months in a world where people routinely looked past her like she was furniture, had felt that land somewhere deep inside her sternum like a bell being struck. She walked to him. "I'm going to check the bike first," she said. "Told you to. I heard you." She crouched near the engine. The smell was strong, but the flame was small, not a leak. Just residual heat from the exhaust against dry brush. She pulled her jacket off, balled it up, and smothered it. Took 4 seconds. Okay, that's handled. She came around to his back and crouched behind him. The restraints were zip ties, 2 of them layered, pulled tight enough that she could see the indentations in his wrists, even in the dark. She opened her knife. "Hold still, you carry a knife." 14 months on the road, she said. "Yes." "How old are you?" "Old enough." She worked the blade carefully under the first zip tie. "These are tight." They wanted to make sure. "Who's they?" He didn't answer right away. She could feel him measuring something, some internal calculation she didn't have access to. Then he said, "People who don't want certain information getting to certain places." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it's not." The first zip tie snapped. She started on the second. "What's your name?" "Jack." "Emily," he repeated. And something happened in his voice when he said it, something she couldn't identify. Some small shift in his tone that was over before she could examine it. "Live out here?" "I live everywhere out here." "Homeless?" "Unhoused," she said, because she had heard a social worker use that word once, and it had felt less like an insult, even though she had stopped caring about insults a long time ago. For now, the second zip tie snapped. Jack brought his arms forward slowly, his jaw tightening as the circulation returned. His wrists were marked red where the plastic had dug in. He opened and closed his hands twice, then looked up at her. This was the first time she saw his face clearly. He was older than she had expected, somewhere in his mid-40s, maybe a little past, a face that had been through weather and decisions both, with a jaw that hadn't been shaved in a few days and eyes that were very dark and very alert. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, dried blood tracking down toward his cheekbone, and the beginning of bruising along the right side of his jaw. He had been in a fight, a real one, not an argument. Somebody had put their hands on this man with intent, but his eyes were steady. "You should have walked away," he said. "Probably," Emily agreed. She stood up and looked toward the road. "How long ago did they leave?" 20 minutes, maybe 25. "So we have maybe 30 minutes, if we're lucky." He got to his feet slowly, bracing against the mile marker, and she noticed he favored his left side cracked rib, maybe, or just bruising. He was tall, 6'2" at least, and the kind of broad that came from years of physical work rather than a gym. The Hells Angels patch on his vest was visible now, the red and white colors unmistakable even in the dark. Emily saw her looking at it. "Does that bother you?" he asked. "Doesn't change what's happening," she said. Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, but in the same neighborhood. Most people see that patch and they run. Most people have more to lose. She looked down the road in the direction she had been walking. "You have a phone?" "They took it. I have mine. No data right now, but 911 still works on emergency." "Don't call 911. She looked at him. "I mean it," he said. "Not because I'm hiding anything. Because the people who did this have reached into local law enforcement. If you make that call, it flags before any help gets here." Emily stood there for a moment. 14 months of learning to read situations told her several things at once. He was not lying, he was not performing, and the way he had said reach into local law enforcement was not the way someone said it if they were making it up. That was the kind of statement that came from experience. Specific, painful experience. Okay, she said. No 911. Then what? I need to reach my brothers. Your brothers. 3 of them are about 40 miles east. They've been looking for me since 9 o'clock last night when I missed a check-in. You have brothers 40 miles away, and you missed a check-in last night, and they haven't called 911 either? We handle things differently, he said. There was a sound then. Both of them heard it at the same moment, and the way they both went still. Both turned toward the same direction. Both stopped breathing at the same instant, said something about the situation that no additional words could improve. Engines. Motorcycles. More than one. Coming from the west, which was the direction the road curved away into darkness, which was the direction Jack had already told her his people had gone. That's them, Jack said. Emily's hand went to her side pocket. Stop, his voice was low and fast. Don't. If you draw on them, they'll... He stopped, looked at her, made a decision. Get behind the mile marker. I'm not hiding, Emily. The way he said her name this time was different from the way he had said it before. Not curious, not careful, but urgent. And something else underneath the urgency that she couldn't name. Please. Not because you can't handle yourself. Because I need you to be somewhere I can account for. She didn't know why that worked. It shouldn't have worked. She didn't take instructions from strangers, had not for 14 months, had learned to trust her own judgment above every other consideration. But the word please from this man, who had tried to send her away even with his hands tied, and a fire 3 feet from his fuel tank, sat differently than other words had sat. She moved back. She did not hide behind the mile marker. She stood beside it. Her hand stayed near the side pocket, and she kept her eyes on the road, and she did not breathe like someone who was afraid, because she wasn't afraid exactly. She was something else. Something quieter than fear and more focused. She was watching. 3 motorcycles came around the curve. They were not the people who had tied Jack's hands. Emily knew this the moment they stopped, not because of anything they said, but because of the way Jack's whole body changed when he saw them. The held tension went out of his shoulders like something cut loose. Didn't smile, but he breathed. The 3 riders cut their engines. For a moment, nobody spoke. The one who got off his bike first was the youngest of the 3, late 20s, maybe 30, with a face that was trying very hard to look tough and kept failing in the direction of something more like worry. He had his helmet off before he'd fully stopped moving, and the way he walked toward Jack, fast, direct eyes scanning every visible inch of him, was the walk of someone who had been afraid of what he was going to find. Jack. Not a question. Not relief exactly. Just the name, the way you say a name when the person is standing in front of you, and you are still adjusting to the fact that they are standing. Ryan, Jack's voice was level. I'm all right. You're not all right, Ryan said. You've got blood on your face, and your bike is on the ground, and you've been missing for... He stopped. Eyes had found Emily. Who's this? She helped me, Jack said. Ryan looked at Emily with the expression of someone doing a rapid and unsentimental assessment. She let him look. She had been looked at in the past 14 months by people who wanted to decide whether she was a threat, a resource, or a complication. She had learned that the best response was to look back clearly, without aggression and without apology, and let them reach their own conclusions. Turned back to Jack. She know anything? She knows my hands were tied and she cut me loose. That's it. The second rider had approached by now, mid-30s, heavier build, with a quietness about him that Emily recognized as the kind of quiet that comes from thinking before speaking. He looked at the motorcycle on the ground, then at Jack's wrists, then at Emily, and said nothing, but something in the way he nodded acknowledged a situation that he seemed to understand better than anyone was saying out loud. The third rider stayed near his bike. Older, late 40s, with a gray-streaked beard and the posture of a man who was continuously scanning the perimeter without making it obvious. He was watching the road in both directions. Not paranoid. Professional. We need to move, the gray-bearded man said. Voice was unhurried, which somehow made it more urgent. Ryan was still looking at Emily. What do we do with her? She can go, Jack said, and looked at Emily. You can go. You've done more than enough. More than you should have done. Emily looked at the 3 men in front of her. Then she looked at Jack, at the dried blood above his eyebrow and the bruising on his jaw and the careful way he was holding his left side. She thought about her rule. Never stop for strangers. She She had already broken it once tonight. Breaking it a second time felt, somehow, less like a mistake and more like something that was going to be important later, even though she could not have said why. "Where are you going?" she asked. "That's not your concern," Ryan said. Jack's voice was quiet but clear. Ryan closed his mouth. Jack looked at Emily. "We're going to a safe location, 40 miles east. If you want to ride to the next town, we can take you that far. Or you can go your own way from here. Either choice is completely yours." She had been walking for 2 days. Her heel was raw. She had $4.30 in her left boot and a granola bar with one bite taken out of it in her backpack and no particular destination. "Ride to the next town," she said. "That's all." "That's all," Jack agreed. The gray-bearded man had already moved to the fallen motorcycle, and without being asked, Ryan went to help him. They lifted the bike in a way that suggested that they'd done it before, checked something on the engine, and exchanged a look. "It'll run," the gray-bearded man said. "Nathan, take it slow." The quiet man, Nathan, simply nodded and went to the bike. Ryan came back to Jack and Emily. He looked at Emily for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then he said, "Get on." Not unfriendly, not friendly either, just the statement of a situation. Emily slung her backpack more securely and swung up behind Ryan on his bike without being asked twice. They started to move. She looked back once at the mile marker, at the dark stretch of road where she had been walking alone, at the nothing she was leaving behind. She faced forward. The cold hit her face as the bike gathered speed, and she did not hold on to Ryan's jacket. She braced on the seat, her core steady, her balance adjusted for the motion, which she found came naturally to her the way a lot of things came naturally to her now that had once seemed impossible. When you have nothing to hold on to for long enough, you learn to hold yourself. The road opened up in front of them. Emily Walker, who had stopped for a stranger, who had broken her only rule, who had crouched in the dark behind a man with the Hells Angels patch and cut the plastic from his wrists with a folding knife she bought at a pawn shop 6 months ago, Emily Walker was going 40 miles east. She told herself it was just a ride. She told herself she would be gone before morning. She was wrong about both things. She just didn't know it yet. The chapter house, Emily would learn that word later, chapter house, because every operational unit of a motorcycle club was a chapter, and every chapter had a house, was not what she expected. She could not have said exactly what she had expected. Something harder, maybe. Something that matched the images her brain had accumulated over years of half-heard news stories and television dramas. Something that felt like threat. What she found instead was a large converted property at the end of a gravel road, lit from the outside by functional lights, a garage that held several motorcycles, and a common area visible through large windows where men were sitting and talking, and one of them was eating cereal. Cereal. It was past 4 in the morning, and a man in a Hells Angels vest was sitting at a table eating cereal with the focused interest of someone who had not eaten in a while and was not interested in making a performance out of fixing that. Emily stopped walking. Ryan behind her said, "You okay?" "Don't know yet." She stepped inside. The room was large and functional. There were tables, chairs, a kitchen area, a television on the far wall that was running a news channel with the sound low. The walls had photographs, actual photographs, framed, hung with some care, and she looked at them without meaning to, because the pictures were not what her imagination had supplied. There were veterans. Older men, some in uniforms from a generation back, some in the vests she recognized now, at what appeared to be charity events. There were children at what looked like a toy drive. Group of bikers with an elderly woman who was beaming at the camera like someone who had just been surprised in a good way. There was a photograph of a flag-draped coffin at a military funeral with 6 men in vests standing at attention, and Emily looked at it longer than she meant to. "That was Marcus," Nathan said from beside her. She hadn't heard him approach, which said something about how tired she was. Veteran. No family left. We gave him the send-off he deserved. Had. Emily looked at the photograph for another moment. "Sit down," Nathan said. "There's coffee. You look like you need it." She sat. She did not want to sit because sitting meant accepting hospitality, and accepting hospitality meant complicated things about what was happening and what she owed and what came next. But her legs had been working for 2 days, and they were making their own decision. Jack came through the back of the room. His wrists had been wrapped. Someone had already attended to them, quickly and efficiently. The way it was done, when this sort of thing was not an unusual occurrence, cut above his eye had a piece of medical tape on it. He moved easier than he had at the roadside, which suggested that the careful posture had been partly performance, partly precaution. Sat down across from her. They looked at each other for a moment. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "I told you, 14 months. Where before that?" "Phoenix." She wrapped both hands around the coffee mug someone had put in front of her. It was hot, real coffee, and it tasted better than almost anything had tasted in a very long time. "I had a place. Lost it, family?" "No," she said it, flatly, not with pain, just with the flatness of a fact. "My father left about 3 years ago. I held on to the apartment for another year after that, but I was 17 and working 2 part-time jobs that don't pay rent in Phoenix without help. So," she made a small gesture with one hand that meant, "and so here we are." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What's your last name?" Something about the question was wrong. Not the question itself. It was a reasonable question, a normal question. But the way he asked it, the slight pause before it, the way his eyes had gone very still, it hit Emily the same way a sound hits you when you're almost asleep, sharp enough to drag you back to the surface. "Why do you want to know my last name? Just asking." "You weren't just asking," she said. "People who are just asking don't change the way they're sitting before they ask." He looked at her for a long moment. In that moment, Emily felt the first tremor of something she would have been unable to explain and unwilling to name, a kind of atmospheric pressure shift, like when a storm is coming and the air itself knows before you do. "Walker," she said. "Emily Walker." She heard it before she saw it. The room changed, not loudly, not dramatically. Ryan, who had been talking to Nathan near the coffee machine, stopped talking. Nathan set his mug down. The man with the cereal looked up. Jack, who had the kind of face that did not betray much, Jack closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. "What?" Emily said. He opened his eyes. "There's something you need to know," he said. "Then say it. It's going to change things." "Say it anyway." Jack leaned forward, both arms on the table. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just realized he is finally standing in front of the person he has been carrying it toward. "Father," he said. "Richard Walker." Emily's hands tightened on the coffee mug. "I know your father," Jack said. "I've known him for 3 years. Time Oscar's side had. And the reason you've been living on the road for 14 months, the reason your father left, the reason he hasn't come back, it's not what you think it is. It was never what you think it is." The room was very quiet. Emily sat very still, and 14 months of surviving everything, of learning not to feel things too quickly, of keeping herself armored and moving and functional. 14 months cracked, just slightly, just at the corner where the cold got in. "My father left," she said. "He left a note. It said he was sorry." "I know what the note said." "Then you know, Emily." Jack's voice was steady and careful and held something in it. She had not expected a kind of grief, she thought, the kind that comes from knowing the ending of a story that someone else has not yet heard. "Father didn't leave you. He disappeared. And the people who made him disappear, the people who came after me tonight, they know your name. They have known your name for 3 years, and somehow in 14 months of living on the road, they never found you." He paused. "Till now." Emily Walker set down the coffee mug. She looked at the man across the table from her. She looked at the photographs on the walls, the veterans, the families, the flag-draped coffin. She looked at her own hands. She thought about a note on a kitchen table that said, "I'm sorry, Emmy." She had always read that note as abandonment. What if it was something else? What if "I'm sorry" was not an apology for leaving? What if it was an apology for what was coming? Pressure in the room had not lessened. Ryan and Nathan and the man with the cereal were all watching her with the careful, quiet attention because people wait what she would do next. And she had the sudden vertiginous sense that this moment, this exact moment, in this room, 4:37 in the morning, had been approaching for 3 years, and she was the only one who hadn't known it was coming. "Tell me everything," she said. Her voice did not shake. Jack looked at her for a moment, and something moved. Expression, respect, she thought, or something close to it. "All right," he said, and he began. Jack did not start at the beginning. Started at the end, or at least what Emily had always believed was the end, and worked backward from there. The way you do when you know the person across from you has been living inside the wrong version of a story for 3 years, and every word you are about to say is going to cost them something. 3 years ago, he said, your father came to us. Emily didn't move. Not to this chapter specifically. He came to a brother of ours in Phoenix, a man named Garrett. Father and Garrett had crossed paths a few years before that through a veteran support program your father was volunteering with. Garrett vouched for him, and Richard Walker sat down in a room very much like this one and told us what he had found. What did he find? Emily asked. Jack looked at her steadily. He was working as a contract accountant. Small firm, private clients, nothing high profile. One of those clients had a portfolio that didn't add up. Not in the small, sloppy way that people make mistakes. The very precise, very deliberate way that people hide things. Kind of things, Jack said, that involve taking money from people who don't have lawyers. Elderly homeowners who were told their properties were worthless and then sold those properties for 20 times what they were paid. Veteran families who applied for housing assistance and were steered into fraudulent loan agreements they couldn't read and couldn't fight. People who were already drowning, who got handed an anchor and told it was a life preserver. Emily's jaw tightened. Your father found the records, Jack continued, all of it, and he was smart enough to know that the moment he went to the wrong person with those records, the records would disappear, and so would he. He paused. He was also smart enough to know that he didn't have much time before the people behind this realized someone had been in their books. So he came to you, Emily said. He came to us, Jack confirmed, because he had heard through Garrett that Hell's Angels didn't have a lot of patience for people who preyed on veterans, which is accurate. His voice was completely even when he said it, not aggressive, just factual, the way you state something that does not require defense. We told him we'd help him get the evidence somewhere it couldn't be buried. We told him we'd protect him while he did it. My father trusted that? Your father didn't have many options, Jack said. But yes, he trusted it. Emily picked up the coffee mug again. She needed something to do with her hands. So what happened? What happened, Jack said, is that the operation was bigger than any of us understood. And the man running it, a man named Victor Royce, had people inside law enforcement, inside city government, inside the financial oversight system that was supposed to catch exactly what he was doing. When your father's access to the financial records got flagged, Royce moved faster than we anticipated. Ryan from across the room said quietly, "We got your father out." Emily looked at him. "Not in time to get you too," Ryan said, and something in his voice told her that this was not the first time he had said those words, that he had said them to himself before now, maybe more than once. It happened fast. Royce's people moved on your father's apartment. We had maybe 40 minutes of warning. Your father, he made choices about what mattered most in those 40 minutes. He left me a note, Emily said. He left you a note, Ryan agreed, because he couldn't take you with him without putting you directly in Royce's path. Because if Royce knew your father had a daughter he cared about. He stopped, pressed his lips together. Your father made a calculation that the safest place for you was somewhere Royce didn't know to look. The silence in the room had a weight to it now. Emily sat with all of it. The information was landing in layers, the way heavy things land, each layer requiring the previous one to settle before the next one could be absorbed. Father had not left her. Her father had run, and he had run away from her deliberately, purposefully, because staying close to her would have made her a target. She had spent 3 years hating him for abandoning her. Every day of those 3 years, she had been the one thing he was trying to protect. Where is he now? She asked. Jack's expression shifted not much, but enough. Jack, she said, where's my father now? We don't know, he said. The words hit her like cold water. What do you mean you don't know? 8 months ago, Jack said, carefully, your father went to retrieve something, evidence he had hidden, before he disappeared, documents and recordings that Royce could not get to, that were stored in a location only your father knew. He was supposed to be back in 72 hours. Jack's hands were flat on the table. He didn't come back. Emily stared at him. We have been looking for him since then, Jack said. We have not stopped looking. But we have also been operating under the assumption that if Royce's people got to him, what they wanted was not just your father. What they wanted was the evidence. And the evidence The evidence is still out there, Emily said. Somewhere your father hid it, Jack said. Yes, and you don't know where. No, Emily set the mug down again. She pressed both palms flat on the table surface and breathed once, slowly, through her nose. The room waited. But you think I might, she said. Jack looked at her. That's why you said my name like that, she said. When I told you my name, that's why the whole room changed. Not because you recognized me from some photo or some file, because you knew that if Richard Walker's daughter was walking alone on a highway at 4 in the morning somewhere between where you were and where the evidence might be. She stopped, felt something click into place with the precision of a mechanism that had been almost completed for a long time. You think my father led me here? The man who had been eating cereal put down his bowl. Nathan crossed his arms. Ryan exhaled. Jack said, your father knew you better than almost anyone. He knew that if everything fell apart, you would end up moving, traveling, putting miles between yourself and the thing that hurt you, because that's what people do when they're surviving. He knew the road you'd likely take because it's the road he taught you: highway patterns, safe corridors, the routes that have the most options if something goes wrong. He paused. He knew that if you were moving south and east out of Phoenix, eventually you would come through this corridor. And he knew that if anything happened to him before he got the evidence out, someone needed to find you before Royce did. Emily said nothing. We have been watching this stretch of road, Jack said. Not every night, not with any certainty. But we have been watching it because your father asked us to. Because he said, if something goes wrong, find Emily. Keep her safe. Tell her the truth. He said, tell her the truth, Emily repeated. Exact words Jack said were, don't protect her from it. She can take it. She's tougher than she looks and smarter than she knows. And the truth is the only thing that can actually help her. Emily Walker was not a person who cried easily. She had not cried the night she found the empty apartment. She had not cried when the last of her money ran out, or when she lost the storage unit with the last of her belongings, or on any of the dozens of nights when crying would have been the most reasonable response to the most unreasonable circumstances. She had learned, somewhere in the first 3 months, to convert what would have been grief into motion, into the next step, into the next plan. She didn't cry now either. But something shifted in her face that the men in the room all noticed, and none of them commented on because they were not stupid men, and they understood the difference between weakness and the moment when something that has been held tightly for a very long time is allowed to move. She breathed. Okay, she said. Ryan blinked. Okay? Okay, she said again, steadier. Tell me about Royce. Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and sat back. Victor Royce, he said, is 61 years old. He built his first real estate company when he was 28. By the time he was 40, he had enough capital to move into financial services, which is where the real money is if you're willing to cross lines. By 50, he had a network that crossed 3 states and touched everything from housing development to pension funds to charitable trusts that exist primarily on paper. Neon sign outside had. He said it with deliberateness, someone who had memorized these facts because they mattered, because they were the anatomy of an enemy worth understanding. He is not a man who gets his hands dirty. He has people for that. He has entire organizational layers for that. The reason your father's evidence is so important is that it's one of the very few things that connects Royce directly, not through intermediaries, not through shell companies, directly to the people he harmed. Why didn't you just go to federal law enforcement? Emily asked. This crosses state lines. It's FBI. Why not go to them? Tried, Ryan said, and the flatness in his voice answered the next 3 questions before she could ask them. 2 years ago, we put together what we had and brought it to a contact inside the federal system that we trusted. Someone clean, someone with no connection to Royce. He stopped. The contact is dead. Ruled a suicide. The information we brought in was never logged. Emily stared at him. This is what Royce does, Nathan said from the corner. It was the most words he had said since they arrived, and the others seemed to register this the way people register when the quiet one in the room decides to speak. He doesn't fight the system. He buys the pieces he needs, and he lets the system do the work for him. Anytime something gets close, it disappears, not dramatically, quietly. The way things disappear when the right people decide they haven't seen them. Then how do you stop someone like that? Emily asked. You get the evidence he can't make disappear, Jack said. Evidence that's already been seen by too many people in too many places for it to be quietly erased. Evidence that hits the public record before his people can intercept it. He paused. Your father understood that. It's why he didn't just copy the documents and email them to a reporter. Constructed something, a package, he called it, that was designed to go to multiple targets simultaneously the moment it was activated. News outlets, oversight bodies, advocacy organizations. Chain reaction. Royce could plug one leak, maybe two. He cannot plug 12 at once. And this package, Emily said slowly, it's hidden somewhere. Somewhere only your father knew, Jack said. Somewhere we believe your father left you a way to find. Emily looked down at her hands on the table. A way to find. She thought about her father, about the specific, careful way Richard Walker had operated in the world, his preference for systems over impulse, his habit of creating what he called redundancies, backup plans for backup plans. He had taught her to read maps when GPS was available, because what if the signal goes down, Emmy? He had taught her to keep $20 in her shoe, because what if your wallet gets taken? He had been a man who thought 3 steps of the present moment as a matter of reflex, not paranoia. She thought about something else, something she had not thought about in almost 2 years. He used to take me somewhere, she said. The room shifted again, barely perceptibly, but she caught it, the way Jack's posture changed, the way Ryan leaned forward almost imperceptibly, the way Nathan unfolded his arms. Place from when I was little, she said, outside the city. We used to go there, he called it our place, which even then I knew was a little corny, but he meant it seriously. He went there to think, to clear his head. She looked up. He showed it to me when I was maybe 12. He said I remember exactly what he said, because it was one of those things that sounds bigger than a 12-year-old knows what to do with. He said, if I ever ask you to remember something, go there. If you ever need to find something I left for you, go there. The silence in the room was absolute. If I ever need to find something I left for you, Jack repeated. Quietly, precisely, Emily. That's it. It might be nothing, she said, because the part of her that had learned to protect herself from hope was already building its defenses. It was something he said once, years ago. He might not have actually. He planned every step of this from the beginning, Jack said. Every step, the people he told, the way he hid the evidence, the way he left the note, short enough to tell you he hadn't simply left, long enough to tell you he thought about what he was leaving. He planned it, Emily. And if he told you to remember that place, it wasn't small talk. Emily pressed her lips together. She knew the place. She knew exactly where it was. 20 miles outside Phoenix, off a county road that most people drove past without noticing. Unremarkable piece of geography that her father had nevertheless treated with a particular, quiet reverence that she had absorbed without understanding. She could find it in the dark. And then Ryan's phone went off. Not a call, a text alert, the specific tone of something set up to notify rather than communicate. And the sound of it made Nathan move immediately toward the door, which told Emily everything she needed to know about what kind of alert it was. Ryan looked at the screen. His expression did not change. That was how she knew it was bad. They found the bike, he said. The location, how Jack was already on his feet. Plate reader on the highway, 1 mile east of where we picked you up. Ryan was already moving. They'll trace the direction we rode. They know this territory, Jack. They'll have this address in 20 minutes, maybe less. Emily stood. She did it automatically, without deciding to, the way you stand up when the room suddenly has an exit problem and your body knows before your brain catches up that standing is the correct first position. She pulled the straps of her backpack tight. Nathan appeared in the doorway. Bikes are ready, Emily. Jack turned to her. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it, now not quite urgency, not quite something she could name, but something that communicated the serious recalibration of a situation. You said you know where this place is. Yes, can you take us there? She looked at him. I know that's a lot to ask, he said. I know we are 4 hours into knowing each other, and I am asking you to trust people you have no reason to trust and walk directly into the most dangerous part of what is happening right now instead of away from it. He held her gaze. But I need you to understand something. The evidence your father hid, if Royce gets to it first, it's over. For all the families he stole from. For your father's name. For any chance of anyone ever knowing the truth. A pause. for whatever chance there is of finding your father. That last thing. That last thing was the one he hadn't said before, and the one that landed with a different weight than all the other things, because every other thing was about justice and systems and evidence, and those were real and important. But finding your father was the sentence that found the crack in her armor that she had not been aware was there. Your father is still out there somewhere, Jack said. Believe that. I have no proof of it, and I won't lie to you and tell you I'm certain. But Royce needs something from him. And men like Royce don't eliminate assets while they still have use. Emily stood in the middle of the room and looked at the photographs on the wall. The veterans, the families, the man with the cereal who had quietly left the room at some point and come back with his jacket on, and a look on his face that said he knew the shape of what was coming and was not unready for it. She thought about 14 months of walking. She thought about the one rule she had made and kept and already broken tonight. She thought about her father's handwriting on a kitchen table note, and the way she had read it as a goodbye, and the way she was now rereading it 3 years later as something else entirely. She thought, I'm sorry, Emmy. I'm sorry for what you're about to go through. Sorry I can't tell you the whole truth right now. I'm sorry that the only way I can protect you is to leave you with nothing except your own strength, which I believe in completely. She turned to Jack. I know exactly where it is, she said. Ryan was already by the door. Nathan had the bikes running. She could hear the engines, low and steady through the walls. The man with the cereal, whose name she still didn't know, appeared to have simply accepted that whatever was happening next included him without anyone needing to say so. Then we go, Jack said. There's something you need to know first, Emily said. He stopped. Royce's people, she said. When they got to you tonight, what did they ask you about? Jack's expression flickered. Jack. Her voice was quiet and direct and would not be redirected. What did they ask you about? They asked me, he said slowly, if we had found Richard Walker's daughter. Emily nodded once. And what did you tell them? I told them we hadn't. How long did they believe you? Jack was quiet for exactly long enough to tell her the answer. Not long enough, she said. No, so they already know you have me. It's possible. It's certain, she said. If they pulled the plate from the highway and traced you here, they know you have me, because they were already looking for me. You just confirmed I exist and I'm in contact with you. The room processed this. It changes what they'll do next, Emily said. She was thinking out loud now, rapidly, the way she thought, when the problem was survival-shaped and the timeline was short. If they just wanted to stop the evidence from surfacing, they would focus on the location. But if they know you have me, and they believe I know where the evidence is, they'll follow us instead of the location, Ryan said. He had caught up with where she was going, and his expression said he did not love arriving there. They'll let us lead them right to it. Yes, Emily said. Silence. So we have two problems, Nathan said from the doorway. Getting to the evidence and getting to it without them on our tail. We have three problems, Emily corrected. Getting to the evidence, getting to it clean, and whatever they've done with my father in the 8 months since he went missing. Because if he went to the same location and didn't come back, that tells us something. Tells us either the location was compromised, Jack said, or he never made it. Or he made it, Emily said, and couldn't leave. The engines were running, the clock was running, the 20 minutes Ryan had estimated before Royce's people could trace the address was becoming 15, then 12. Emily looked at Jack. You said my father trusted you, she said. Yes. Then I'm going to trust you, she said. Not because I have no other choice. I always have another choice. I have been making my own choices for 14 months and I know how. Trusting you because my father did, because the man who wrote that note on the kitchen table did not make careless decisions about who deserved trust. She picked up her backpack. She walked toward the door. Let's go get his evidence, she said. Ryan moved to follow. Nathan was already outside. Jack stood for one more second in the middle of the room where the photographs were, looking at her with something she didn't have time to examine. Then he followed. They went out into the cold early morning, where the sky was just beginning to think about changing at the far eastern edge. Not light yet, just the suggestion of light, the first faint argument against the dark. The bikes were warm and ready. The air tasted like cold asphalt and something that might have been rain hours away. Emily got on behind Ryan without being asked. She did not look behind her. She had spent 14 months looking behind her. She thought about a place 20 miles outside Phoenix, off a county road, where her father had taken her when she was 12 and said something she had carried without knowing she was carrying it. She thought about the fact that somewhere between everything she had believed about her father and everything she now knew, there was a version of him she had never been allowed to see, a man who had found something dangerous and chosen to fight it rather than ignore it, who had been careful and deliberate and afraid and brave in the specific combination that distinguishes people who do the right thing from people who merely want to. She thought, he knew I'd survive this. He knew I'd be tough enough. For the first time in 3 years, she was not angry about that. She was something else. She was ready. The bikes pulled out of the gravel lot and turned east, and the night swallowed them, and somewhere behind them, on a stretch of Arizona highway, where the mile markers counted up toward dawn, 3 vehicles were turning onto the road. Following. They rode hard for the first 20 minutes, nobody speaking, the kind of silence that has a task inside it. Emily kept her eyes on the road ahead and her mind on the problem, which was the only thing she knew how to do when the situation was moving faster than her feelings could catch up. Ryan drove with the controlled aggression of someone who knew this road, who had ridden it at speed before and understood which curves required respect and which ones could be pushed. She matched his movements without thinking, her body adjusting with the bike. She noted somewhere in the back of her mind that 14 months of sleeping on uneven surfaces and walking miles of uneven ground had given her a physical awareness of her own balance that she had not had before. You learn things in hard places. That was the only honest accounting of what the road had cost her and what it had given back. Halfway to the county road, Ryan's hand came up a signal, flat palm, the kind that meant slow down now, not stop, not panic, but change what you're doing immediately. They slowed. What is it? Emily said, close to his ear. Blue SUV, Ryan said. 3 back. It was behind us when we left the house. Still 3 back. Emily turned her head just slightly, not enough to be obvious. How long? Since we hit the main road. They're not trying to close the distance. No, they don't need to, she said. They already know where we're going. How is that possible? Ryan said. You haven't told anyone the location. I haven't, she said. But think about it. If they've had my father for 8 months and they've been trying to get the location out of him. She stopped. Let Ryan finish the math. His shoulders tightened. They might already know. Or they know enough, she said. Enough to know the general area. Enough to be waiting for someone to walk through the right door. Ryan said nothing for a moment. Then I need to tell Jack. They were riding in formation, Jack behind them, Nathan behind Jack, the man whose name she still hadn't asked, bringing up the rear. She watched Ryan signal through the small mirror, 2 fingers down, which apparently communicated something specific because she saw Jack's hand move in acknowledgement almost immediately. It did not slow down. They did not stop. They adjusted subtly, the spacing between bikes changing in a way that suggested a formation shift without explaining why. Looked like nothing. She suspected it was not nothing. His name is Cole, Ryan said, without her asking. The one at the back. He doesn't say much, I noticed. He's the best one of us in a bad situation. Emily glanced in the mirror at the road behind them. 3 vehicles back, the blue SUV maintained its precise, patient distance. Reminded her of something predatory. Not the aggressive charge of something that wants to take you down quickly, but the patient trailing of something that knows it doesn't need to rush because the terrain will eventually work in its favor. She had felt that before. Not from a car, from a city, from a situation, from the particular geometry of having no good options. She knew what it felt like to be surrounded without any individual thing touching you. She knew how to think inside that feeling. There's a county road turnoff in about 4 miles, she said. Old access road. My father used it because it doesn't appear on standard mapping applications. It was added to the county system but never digitized. Google Maps shows it as a field. You think they know about it? They've had my father 8 months, and he hasn't told them the exact location, she said. Then, either he doesn't know about the access road, or he's protected it. My father was careful. If he used it, he would have given them the main road, not the turnoff. You're betting a lot on knowing how your father thinks. Taught me to think, she said simply. So yes. Ryan was quiet for 2 seconds. And if you're wrong? Then we find out very quickly, she said, and we deal with that instead. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but lived in the same neighborhood. Your father said you were stubborn. He was right. She paused. When did he say that? Last time I saw him, 6 months before he disappeared. We had dinner at this terrible roadside place outside Scottsdale. Worst enchiladas I have ever eaten in my life. And he talked about you for about an hour. Ryan's voice shifted when he said it. Not much, just the slight change in register that comes when someone is navigating around something they feel. He said you were the most stubborn person he had ever met. Said it like it was the thing he was most proud of. Emily pressed her lips together and looked at the road. He carried your picture, Ryan said, in his jacket. Beat-up thing, looked like it had been folded and folded 100 times. He looked at it. Ryan stopped himself, started again quieter. He looked at it the way people look at things they're afraid they're going to lose. The turnoff was coming up. Get ready, Emily said, and something in her voice closed the conversation, not harshly, but finally the way you close a window when the weather outside becomes something you have to deal with rather than observe. Now, Ryan said 50 yards. Don't signal, brake early. Turn at speed on a county access road. Ryan. He turned. The bike leaned hard, gravel flying from the tires, and she felt the G-force of it through her whole body, her weight shifting to compensate, grip on the seat rather than on Ryan because she had learned a long time ago that when things went sideways, you held on to yourself first. The road, such as it was barely road, packed earth and loose stone, and something that had once been gravel and was now mostly the memory of gravel. She looked back. The blue SUV shot past the turnoff on the main road. Slow, didn't turn. Okay, Ryan said, his voice carrying the specific exhale of someone who has just realized their luck has held by a narrower margin than they would have preferred. Okay, good call. Behind them, Jack and Nathan and Cole had made the turn. The formation tightened again, all 4 bikes now on the access road, single file, moving slower but deliberate. How far? Ryan asked. 2 miles, she said, maybe a little more. They'll figure out they lost us in about 3 minutes, he said. They'll start working the side roads. 2 miles takes 4 minutes at this speed, so we have a minute of margin. We have a minute of margin, she confirmed, and the math of it sat between them on the bike like a passenger. 1 minute. She had survived on smaller margins than that. The access road bent, left and then right, and then opened onto what her father had always called the flat, a wide stretch of packed earth with a slight elevation, unremarkable and unnoticed, the kind of place that exists in the geography of a region without ever making it into anyone's memories except the people who were deliberately taken there. She had been there twice. Once when she was 12, when she was 15, and her father had driven her out here on a Saturday with no explanation except that he wanted to show her something, and what he had shown her was the way the light looked at that elevation in the late afternoon, amber and specific, and he had said something about how some things were worth knowing even if you never needed them. She had not understood it then. She understood it now, with the particular clarity of hindsight that arrives when the past becomes infrastructure. Stop here, she said. Ryan stopped. The other bikes pulled up behind them. 4 engines cut off, one after another. The silence was immediate and total, in the way that open ground makes silence total. No walls to trap sound, just the absence of it spreading out in every direction. Jack was beside her in seconds. How close? We're here, she said. Looked at the ground around them, then at her. Where is it? Don't know yet, she said. Give me a minute. She stepped away from the bike. She stood still, which was not nothing. The urge to move, to search, to do something physical with the urgency she was feeling was almost physical itself. But she had learned that stillness was sometimes the fastest path to the right answer, and she let herself stand and think and remember. Father had brought her to this flat when she was 12. They had walked from the access road to a specific point, and he had shown her something, not the hiding place. She understood now. Not yet. He had been showing her how to navigate here, how to find the center of it using landmarks that did not move. A particular rock formation to the north, the angle of the main road visible just at the horizon, a dry creek line that ran east to west. He had made her close her eyes and locate herself by those 3 things. She closed her eyes now. Rock formation north, road at horizon northwest, creek line east-west, about 60 feet south of where she was standing. She opened her eyes and walked south, 40 feet, 50. The ground changed slightly underfoot, harder, drier, and then she felt the subtle depression that she remembered now, not visible, not obvious. Just a slight give in the earth that her 12-year-old feet had noticed, and her father had said, "Good girl, you felt it." She stopped. "Here," she said. Jack was behind her. Ryan, Nathan, Cole, all four of them had followed without her hearing them, which said something about how people moved when they were used to situations requiring quiet. "Deep?" Jack asked. "I don't know. I was 12 when he showed me this." She looked down at the ground. He had a system. He always had a system. Whatever is here is weatherproof, double-sealed, and anchored. He would not have hidden something this important in a way that relied on luck to survive. "Cole," Jack said. Cole, without any additional instruction, went back to his bike and returned with a collapsible shovel, the kind that folds into a pack, military style, exactly the kind of tool that you carry if you are accustomed to situations where the tools you need are not going to be provided for you. Did not ask questions. He handed it to Emily. She looked at him. "Should be you," he said. It was the second thing she had heard him say, and the simplicity of it, no explanation, ancient sentiment, just the correct statement made her exhale something she hadn't realized she was holding. She dug. The ground was hard but cooperative, the way dry desert soil is hard on top and workable below, and she went down 8 inches before the shovel hit something that was not soil. She put the shovel aside and used her hands, because her father would have, because her father believed in using your hands for things that mattered, and what her fingers found was a sealed metal container, flat and rectangular, wrapped in a rubberized material that had hardened slightly over 3 years. She lifted it out. It was heavier than she expected. She sat back on her heels and held it in both hands and did not move for a moment because the weight of it was not just physical. She was holding whatever her father had found and hidden and been destroyed for protecting. She was holding the reason he had said, "I'm sorry, Emmy," and walked out of her life. She was holding 3 years of her own suffering in physical form in a metal container small enough to fit in a backpack. "Emily," Jack's voice was quiet. She looked up at him. "Are you all right?" "No," she said, which was honest. "That's fine." She stood. "Let's open it." The seal was a combination mechanism, not digital, not electronic, but mechanical, the old kind, the kind that cannot be hacked or powered down or remotely disabled. 3 rotating rings, each with numbers 0 through 9. Emily held it and thought about her father's systems, his preference for things with personal significance, because personal significance was not searchable. Birthday 406, too obvious. Her mother's birthday, who had died when Emily was 6,119, had first had. The date they had first come here, which Emily remembered because her father had written it on a card he gave her along with a fresh pressed wildflower and the words, "Some days are worth marking." She had never thrown the card away. Even after 14 months on the road, even through everything, the card had been in her backpack in a Ziploc bag alongside her documents and the photograph of herself with her father from the summer she was 13. July 14th, 714. She set the 3 rings, the mechanism released. "There it is," Ryan said softly. From behind her, the reverence in it was real. Inside the container were 3 things: a USB drive in a waterproof case, a bundle of documents sealed in heavy plastic sheeting, and a folded piece of paper that was not sealed, not protected, clearly meant to be found and read immediately. Emily unfolded the paper, her father's handwriting. She had not seen it in 3 years except for 4 words on a kitchen table, and the sight of it, his specific, slightly left-leaning print, the way he made his capital E's with 3 equal bars, the way his lines stayed level without a ruled page, because he had always had that kind of discipline, the sight of it hit her somewhere below the sternum with a force that was indistinguishable from impact. She read, "Emmy, if you are reading this, then things went worse than I hoped and better than I feared. Worse because you found this without me. Better because you found it. The drive and the documents are everything. There is a contact list taped to the inside of the lid, 12 recipients. You need to reach all 12 simultaneously or the window closes. Victor Royce has people watching individually, but he cannot watch everywhere at once. 12 at once is the only way. The man I trust most to help you do this is Jack Mercer. He is with you. Trust him completely. If he is not, find him. He is the only person outside of you who knows all 12 names. I am sorry I could not be there. I am not sorry I fought. You would not have wanted a father who did not fight. I love you. I have always loved you. Every day of every month you have been on your own. I have thought about you every morning when I woke up, and every night before I could sleep. You are the best thing I ever did, Emmy. The only thing I was ever certain of. Dad Emily did not move for a long time. The men around her did not speak, did not shift, gave her the space that the moment required, and she was aware of this with a kind of peripheral gratitude that she would not have known how to express and did not try to. She folded the letter. She put it in her jacket, against her chest, which was where it belonged. She looked at Jack. He says your name. Jack's expression did something complicated and quiet. I know. He says you know all 12 contacts. I do. Then you need to tell me, she said, because he says it has to be simultaneous. All 12 at once, and whatever we're using to reach them cannot be any channel Royce is monitoring. I know a way, Jack said, but it required. Something had changed. Not in the conversation. Around it, Cole had turned. He was facing back toward the access road, completely still, the posture of a man whose senses have caught something before his mind has fully processed it. His right hand had moved to his jacket in a way that was not dramatic and was absolutely unambiguous. How many? Jack said. 2 vehicles, Cole said. They found the turnoff. Ryan was already moving toward his bike. Nathan was on his phone, doing something fast, thumbs working rapidly. Emily's hand went to her side pocket, the knife, the instinct that had kept her alive 14 months, the reflex that fired before the thought. How long? Jack asked. 2 minutes, Cole said. Maybe 90 seconds. Emily. Jack's voice cut through the air with a precision that made every other sound irrelevant. Is there another way out of this flat? She thought. Fast, northwest. There's a dry creek bed. It's passable on bikes if you stay to the left side. The right side has a drop. About 4 feet, you'll lose the bike. Stay left, follow the creek about half a mile. It opens onto the county road at a different point than the access road. Does it come out north or south of the turnoff? North. Then they'll be between us and the main road on the south side, Jack said. But if we're north of the turnoff on the county road, we're ahead of them, she finished. If we move now. We move now, Jack said. There was no debate, no discussion. The container was already in Emily's backpack. She had put it there while she was reading. Automatic, the body knowing before, the mind does what needs to be protected. She had the pack on both shoulders and the straps tight before Jack had finished the sentence. She ran for Ryan's bike. She heard the first engine sound from the access road, not distant anymore. Close, the specific rising pitch of vehicles moving with purpose on uncertain terrain, which meant they knew approximately where they were going, and were no longer being careful about concealment. Go, Cole said. He had not moved toward his own bike. Ryan started. Go. I'll give you 90 seconds. His voice was absolutely level, the voice of someone who has thought about this kind of moment before and made their peace with it long before it arrived. The creek bed is on your left. Don't wait for me. Jack looked at Cole for exactly 1 second. Something passed between them that required no words because it had been built out of years that Emily was not part of and could not fully see. Then Jack said northwest now. Ryan's bike started. Emily was already on it. Jack and Nathan's bikes came to life, and they moved fast northwest, away from the sound of the approaching vehicles, and Emily held the backpack tight against her body, feeling the weight of the container inside it, the weight of the USB drive, and the documents and 12 names that could end Victor Royce's operation and her father's letter against her chest. She heard, from behind them, the sound of a vehicle stopping. Then voices, shouted. Then Cole's voice, once calm and carrying, saying something she couldn't hear clearly, but whose tone was unmistakable, the tone of a man who is not afraid of the people in front of him and wants them to know it. And then they were in the creek bed, navigating left, the bikes working hard on the uneven surface, and she could no longer hear anything from behind her except the sound of 3 engines and the sound of her own blood moving at speed. The creek bed opened onto County Road, exactly where she had said it would. They turned north without stopping. Ryan hit speed. Cole, Emily asked. He can take care of himself, Ryan said, and the particular way he said it, not dismissive, not resigned, but certain. in the way that comes from specific knowledge of a specific person built over specific time made her believe it. She wanted to. They rode north for 3 miles before Jack signaled a pull-off, a wide shoulder, and they stopped. All 3 bikes, engines running. Jack came to her immediately. "The drive," he said. "We need to talk about how we use it." "You said you know a way," she said. "A way that Royce isn't monitoring." "There is a woman," Jack said. "Journalist. She has been working on Royce for 18 months independently. She has a secure server, her own encrypted network, and she has been waiting for primary source material that connects Royce directly. Your father knew about her. She is one of the 12 contacts. You can reach her? Right now." "Yes, but Emily, once this goes out, Royce will know within minutes. He will go on the offensive. Everything he has been doing quietly becomes loud." "I understand that. Do you understand what that means for your father?" Jack said. "If Royce has him and Royce is cornered." She had already thought about this. She had thought about it in the creek bed on the bike, between the sound of Cole's voice and the sound of the engines. She had done the math that she did not want to do. With the honesty that survival had taught her to apply to things she did not want to be honest about. "If my father is alive," she said, "it's because Royce needs something from him. If we release the evidence, Royce loses his leverage over my father because the evidence is already out. He has no more reason to keep him." She held Jack's gaze. "If my father is not alive, then justice is the only thing left that I can give him." Jack looked at her for a long moment. "Your father," he said you were tougher than you looked." "My father was right," she said. "Make the call." Nathan had his phone out, already typing. Ryan was scanning the road behind them, north and south, the vigilance of a man doing a job. The morning had fully committed to arriving now. The sky had crossed the line from suggestion into fact, pale and still cold but undeniably light. Emily Walker stood on the shoulder of a county road with her backpack on and her father's letter against her chest, the most important 3 years of her life in a metal container, and she thought, this is the moment. Not the moment she had survived toward, not the moment she had been surviving for. Because survival did not have destinations. Survival just had the next minute and the minute after that. This was the moment her father had been preparing for. The moment he had trusted her to reach. And then Nathan said, "Jack, we have a problem." His phone was turned outward. On the screen was a text message, 4 words, from a number Emily did not recognize. She read it once. She read it again, 4 words, "I have your father." The road was empty in both directions. The sky was light. The evidence was in her backpack and the letter was against her chest and the 12 contacts were waiting. And somewhere, in a location she did not know, Victor Royce was sitting with his phone in his hand, watching to see what she would do next. Emily read the message a 3rd time, and something happened in her expression that the men around her noticed and would later each describe differently. Ryan would say she looked like she made a decision. Nathan would say she looked like something locked into place. Jack would say quietly that she looked like her father. She looked up from the phone. "Now we know he's alive," she said. "Emily, he's alive," she said. "Royce just told us." "Because dead men are not leverage." She handed the phone back to Nathan. "Send the evidence, all 12, right now. If we send, Royce loses everything except my father. Then we know exactly what this becomes." Her voice was steady and clear and final. "Trade, evidence for my father. Except Royce doesn't get to dictate the terms, because the evidence is already out and we dictate ours." The men looked at each other. Jack said, "Send it." Seaton's thumbs moved. And somewhere across 12 different secure servers, in 12 different locations, 18 months of a journalist's work met 3 years of Richard Walker's courage. And the package began to move, fast, simultaneous, the chain reaction that Victor Royce had spent 3 years trying to prevent igniting all at once in every direction. It was done. Emily exhaled. Her phone, Nathan had handed it back to her, buzzed once. New message from the same unknown number. 2 words this time, "Clever girl." Type back 3, "Where is he?" The answer came in 40 seconds. She read it. She showed it to Jack. His jaw tightened. He looked at her. "That's 3 hours south. Then we have 3 hours to get there before he decides my father is no longer useful," she said. She got on the bike. Ryan didn't ask. He started the engine. South, fast, into the growing light. Emily Walker was not running anymore. She had stopped running somewhere between the creek bed and a forward text message. She was riding towards something instead of it, which felt, in her body, completely different. Felt like the thing she had been learning how to do for 14 months without knowing that was what she was learning. Felt like the fight she had always been in, finally having a direction. 3 hours south meant Tucson, or close enough to it that the difference didn't matter. They rode hard, switching routes twice, when Nathan's secondary phone he carried too told Emily something about the kind of operational thinking that had kept these men alive in situations most people never encountered. Flagged activity on the main highway that looked like coordinated vehicle movement. Royce was reorganizing. He had lost the evidence. He still had the one thing he believed Emily could not walk away from. He was right about that, but he had miscalculated what it meant. Emily rode behind Ryan and thought the way she thought best, which was in motion, with wind and cold, and the physical reality of the road under her, giving the thinking a kind of ballast it didn't have when she was stationary. She thought about her father's letter. She thought about, I am not sorry I fought. She thought about the 12 contacts and the chain reaction and whether it was already moving through the world in a way that could not be recalled. And she thought, yes, it is. That part is done. What remained was her father. Her phone buzzed against her leg. She worked it out of her pocket with one hand. Ryan's bike, steady enough at highway speed that she could read the screen without risking both of them. Nathan's number. The text said, Cole is clear. He's 30 minutes behind us. She exhaled. She hadn't known she was holding that until she released it. Cole, who had stayed behind in the flat with the approaching vehicles and the absolute steadiness of a man who had already decided what he was willing to face, Cole was clear. She did not know exactly what that meant in terms of what had happened in the 30 seconds after they rode into the creek bed, and she suspected that if she asked Cole directly, he would give her 2 words or fewer, but the fact of his being clear meant that whatever had happened had gone the right direction. She typed back, good, 1 word, because that was all the situation required, and she had learned that precision mattered more than volume. Address Royce had sent her was a property address outside Tucson's eastern edge, not a residential address, no street name she recognized, just a parcel number that Nathan had converted to coordinates using a county records database he had accessed from his phone in approximately 40 seconds, which told her that Nathan's quietness was not simplicity but focus, the kind of focus that happens when you have spent years developing a specific and specialized competence. He knew exactly what to do with information and exactly how fast to do it. The property Nathan had reported was a commercial warehouse, not active, flagged as closed in 2021, no current business registration, large enough to have multiple interior spaces, isolated enough to be useful for purposes that benefited from isolation. We need a plan, Jack said, when they pulled off at a rest stop to regroup. The morning was fully established now, actual daylight, and the daylight made things feel simultaneously more real and more dangerous, because in the dark you could move without being seen, and in the light you could not. We have a plan, Emily said. What we have is a location and a motivation, Jack said. That's not the same thing. Royce thinks he's running this, Emily said. He sent me an address. He's expecting me to either come in scared or not come at all. But if I come in scared, he has everything my father, whatever he can extract from the situation. If I don't come at all, he's lost the evidence already, so eventually he has no reason to keep my father alive. So we come in as neither, Ryan said. He was following her logic. She could see it in his face, the way the pieces were landing. We come in as something he's not expecting. He doesn't know how many of us there are, Emily said. He knows you exist. He knew you had me. But he doesn't know what that means in practical terms. He's been dealing with bikers as a concept. He hasn't dealt with these specific people in this specific situation. He has people inside, Nathan said. The property is large. He wouldn't be there with just 1 or 2 men. No, Emily agreed. He wouldn't. But here's what he also doesn't know. She looked at the phone in her hand. The evidence is already out. I checked the journalist's confirmed receipt 40 minutes ago. She is already working, which means Royce's entire operation is already unwinding. He just doesn't know it yet, which means every minute we are riding south is a minute his leverage is becoming worth less because what he's been protecting is already burning. Jack looked at her steadily. So when he finds out, When he finds out, he becomes unpredictable, she said, which is why we need to be there before he finds out. How long before he finds out? Ryan asked. I don't know exactly, but a journalist who has been sitting on 18 months of work and just received primary source material confirmation. Emily paused. She is not going to sit on it long. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Jack looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at his watch. We're 40 minutes out. Then we have maybe 20 minutes of margin, Jack said. We always have 20 minutes of margin. Emily said. Ryan made that sound again, not quite law. She was starting to recognize as the way he processed situations that were objectively terrible, but somehow also slightly absurd in their relentlessness. They pulled back onto the road. 20 minutes of margin. Emily thought about her father, who had hidden evidence in the desert for 3 years and managed to keep from a man with law enforcement connections and 3-state reach and enough money to make inconvenient people disappear. Richard Walker had done that. Not a law enforcement officer, not a federal agent, not a person with resources or protection or institutional backing. Contract accountant who had stumbled into something dangerous and decided that walking away was not acceptable. She thought, I inherited something from him. Not just the stubbornness, which Ryan had confirmed. Something else. The thing that makes you stay when everything logical is telling you to go. The thing that made her stop on a highway at 4 a.m. for a stranger with tied hands. The thing that made her say, I'm trusting you to 4 men she had known for 5 hours because her father trusted them, and her father did not make careless decisions about trust. It was not recklessness. Recklessness was what happened when you didn't think. This was something else, a calculated willingness to be in the right place, even when the right place was dangerous. A refusal to let what was easy win over what was necessary. She had been practicing it for 14 months without knowing that was what she was doing. Every hard night on the road, every situation she had navigated alone, every time she had assessed a threat and responded correctly, every time she had found food or shelter or safety in a landscape that was not designed to offer any of those things to someone in her situation. She had been building exactly the skills this moment required. She had been building them in exactly the hardest possible conditions, which meant they were real skills, not theoretical ones, not practiced in comfort. She was ready for this. She had not known, until this morning, what she had been getting ready for. Paidhead. The warehouse property came into view at the end of a long access drive, and Nathan had already confirmed via satellite mapping on his phone that there were 3 vehicles parked on the far side of the main building. She told them that Royce had brought people, not a lot of people, but enough. Jack pulled them off the access drive 400 yards short of the property. Here's what we know, he said, quickly and clearly, the voice of a man running through an operational checklist. 3 vehicles, call it 2 to 3 people per vehicle maximum. That's 6 to 9 men. Building has 2 confirmed entry points on the front face and at least 1 loading door on the east side. We don't know internal layout beyond what Nathan's map shows, which is approximate. My father will be in the interior, Emily said. Away from windows, away from doors. A room within a room. That's standard for containment. You know about standard containment? Ryan asked. Spent 14 months assessing spaces for safety, she said. Spaces and containment spaces work on the same logic, just from opposite directions. She looked at Jack. If you go in the front, you're walking into whatever he's prepared. If we go in the loading door, they'll have it watched, Nathan said. They'll have it watched, she agreed. But watching a loading door is not the same as being prepared for people to come through it with specific intent, which is different from stumbling onto it defensively. You want to split, Jack said. You and Cole, when he arrives, take the front. Give them something to respond to. Ryan and Nathan come in the loading door with me. Jack shook his head. You are not going in that building. Emily looked at him. Emily, Jack. Her voice was not loud. Did not need to be. My father is in that building. I am the person Royce thinks he's trading for. If I'm not visible when you breach the front, he knows immediately that something is off, and the situation escalates in ways that are bad for my father. I know, and I am the one who knows what my father looks like right now. After 8 months of whatever Royce has done to get information out of him, she held his gaze without blinking. You need me in there, and I need to be in there. There is no version of this where I wait outside. Jack was quiet for 3 seconds, which was 3 seconds of actual consideration, not performance, and she respected it. You stay behind Ryan, he said, at all times. You don't move unless Ryan moves. Agreed. If it goes wrong, we handle that instead, she said, which is what we do. Ryan said, she's got it, Jack. She's got it. He said it simply, and the simplicity of it not reassurance exactly, just affirmation, the statement of someone who had watched Emily operate for the past several hours and reached a conclusion, seemed to land somewhere in Jack's decision-making in a way that the extended argument had not. Jack exhaled. Cole is 12 minutes out. Then we have 12 minutes. They use the 12 minutes the way people use time when they know exactly what's coming. Nathan went over what he knew about the building layout twice. Ryan checked something on his phone and then put it away with the completeness of someone who has gathered all the information available and accepted that the information is imperfect but sufficient. Jack made 2 calls, brief, specific. To Emily did not know, telling them a location and asking them to hold at a distance until contacted. She did not ask who those people were. She suspected they were the kind of asset you called when the situation had escalated past what 4 motorcycles could handle alone. Cole arrived at 11 minutes. He pulled up beside them and cut his engine and looked at Emily first, not at Jack, not at Ryan, directly at her, with the expression of a man who wants to confirm that what he did back at the flat was worth it. You good? He said. I'm good, she said. You? Fine, and that was the entirety of Cole's accounting of whatever had happened in the flat with Royce's vehicles, which she respected as much as she had respected anything in the last 8 hours. Jack briefed him in under 2 minutes. Cole listened without interrupting, nodded twice, and looked at the access drive. Front is exposed, he said. We know, Jack said. We walk it anyway. We walk it anyway, Jack confirmed. You and me, give them something to look at. Cole nodded again. When? 2 minutes. Emily checked the weight of her backpack. The metal container was still inside it. She had not put it down since the flat, had not separated herself from it, because it was the one physical thing in the world that connected her to what her father had spent 3 years protecting. She was not ready to put that weight down yet. She would put it down when it was done. Emily. Nathan appeared at her shoulder. He was holding something out to her, his secondary phone, the one he had been using for coordinates and mapping. On the screen was a news alert. She read the headline in 1 second and felt it move through her nervous system like electricity. The journalist had published. Not the full piece would take hours, but a breaking alert, exclusive primary source documents, link real estate developer Victor Royce to multi-state fraud targeting veterans, elderly homeowners. 3 paragraphs. Primary source confirmation. And at the bottom, in the language of someone who understood exactly what she was doing, additional materials are in the possession of multiple media and oversight organizations simultaneously and cannot be recalled. Royce's phone, wherever he was in that building, was about to receive something that would change the temperature of every decision he was making. Now, Emily said, it has to be now. Jack looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. If he's already seen it, then every second we're standing here is a second he's deciding what to do about my father. She was already moving. Go, front door now. Jack and Cole moved, and outside had. They went up the access drive without any quality of stealth, which was deliberate, which was the point 2 large men in Hell's Angels vests walking toward the front of a building where they were not wanted and not afraid of that, which created a specific and immediate problem for the people inside who were watching the front, which was exactly the kind of problem that took attention and resource and redirected both. Emily went right. Nathan and Ryan flanked her, one on each side, moving along the building's exterior toward the loading door. She could feel her heartbeat not racing, not panicked, but elevated and purposeful, the body doing what it was designed to do when the stakes were real. Her hand was near her side pocket. The knife that had cut Jack's zip ties 8 hours ago on a dark highway was exactly where it always was. She thought, tonight started with a knife and a stranger. Let's see where it ends. The loading door was unlocked. This was either good or very bad, and she made the calculation in approximately 2 seconds. If Royce's people had locked the loading door, they were confident in their perimeter. If it was unlocked, someone had been through it recently and had not locked it behind them, which meant traffic, which meant distraction, which meant they were focused somewhere else. Nathan eased the door open. Ryan went in first, then Emily, then Nathan. The building interior was large and divided. She could feel the space rather than see it. The way sound moved, telling her about walls and distances and the location of people before she could see any of them. Voices, somewhere ahead and to the left, not shouting conversation, urgent but not alarmed, which meant they had heard something but not everything yet. 3 seconds later she heard, from the front of the building, Cole's voice carrying, deliberate, absolutely unafraid, saying something about having a conversation, which was the signal, which meant Jack and Cole had made contact with whatever was at the front door and were doing what they did. The voices ahead shifted. Ryan moved forward. Emily moved with him, 3 steps behind, which was what she had agreed to and which she maintained because agreements meant something, because the thing that made you trustworthy was consistency between what you said and what you did. She had spent enough time around people who broke that consistency to understand exactly what it cost. They found the first man in approximately 40 seconds. He had positioned himself at a corridor junction, told Emily he was guarding something, not the exit, not the entrance, something in the interior that required presence between it and the outside world. Ryan handled the situation with a competence that was not pretty and did not need to be, and the man went down with enough noise that Emily flinched and enough efficiency that the noise was brief. Clear, Ryan said quietly. Nathan was already moving toward the door behind the man's position. Emily reached it first. She did not know what she expected. She had been building an image in her mind for the past 3 hours. In the gaps between the thinking and the planning and the writing, an image of what her father would look like after 8 months of being held by a man like Victor Royce. She had been honest with herself about it, the way she was honest about hard things. 8 months. There would be marks on him. There would be evidence of what that time had cost. And she had already told herself that whatever she saw, she would not fall apart, because falling apart was not useful, and she was a useful person. Falling apart could happen later, somewhere else, when the work was done. She opened the door. Richard Walker was sitting in a chair. His wrists were bound to the armrests with zip ties, the same kind that had been on Jack's wrists 8 hours ago on a highway in the dark, and the echo of that was not lost on her. The strange symmetry of a night that had begun with one set of tied hands and led through everything to these. His face was thinner than she remembered. 3 years thinner, 8 months harder thinner. Hair had gone from the salt and pepper she knew to something more silver. He had a healing cut above his right eye, and the particular stillness of a man who has been in a constrained situation long enough that stillness has become his default, his conservation of energy, his form of resistance. He looked up when the door opened. He looked at Nathan, then Ryan, then the door where Emily was standing. Face did something she had never seen her father's face do. Broke. Not collapsed, not fell apart, broke. The way something breaks when the pressure that was holding it in a particular shape is suddenly and completely removed. All at once, faster than the structure can adapt to. Emmy, he said. His voice was rough, lower than she remembered, worn down. Emmy. She was across the room in 3 steps and on her knees in front of the chair in one motion, and she had her knife out and was working on the first zip tie before she said anything, because that was the right order of operations, and her father would have understood that better than anyone. Got you, she said. I've got you, hold still. You shouldn't be here, he said, and it was the same sentence Jack had said to her on the highway, and it landed the same way, which was to say she understood it, and it made no difference. You were going to send me here. Eventually, she said, cutting through the first tie, starting on the second. You sent me to the flat. You left me the letter. You always knew I'd be in the middle of this. I knew you'd find the evidence, he said. I didn't plan for. Planned everything, she said, and her voice cracked on the second word, just slightly, just for one syllable, and she let it and moved on. You planned it all. Jack, the contacts, the letter. The access road that wasn't on any map. You planned all of it. Not all of it, he said. What didn't you plan? His hands came free, pulled them forward slowly, the same slow movement Jack had made 8 hours ago, circulation returning, and she caught his hands in hers, both of them, his hands in her hands, which were smaller than his, but not by as much as they had been when she was 12, when he had folded both of her hands into one of his at the flat and said, Good girl. You felt it. I didn't plan, he said, on you becoming this. His voice was wrecked and certain at the same time. I thought I was protecting you by leaving you behind. I thought you'd find a way to stay safe, to stay small, to get through it without being in the middle of it. He looked at her. Did not plan on you becoming the person who ends it. She did not have words for what she felt right then, so she did not try to find them. She held his hands and let the moment be what it was, and that was enough. And he seemed to understand that it was enough, because he squeezed her hands once, hard, and then he straightened. We need to move, he said. Yes, she agreed. Victor is in the building. She had not known that. The temperature of the situation changed instantly, a full degree shift, the kind that recalibrates everything. Where? Front. He was monitoring the front cameras. When I heard voices at the front entrance, he left this room. He looked at her steadily. He knows who Jack is. If Jack is at the front, Ryan was already moving to the door. Nathan, front now. Emily pulled her father to his feet. He was unsteady, not badly, not as badly as she had feared. Told her that Royce's long game had required him to keep her father functional enough to be useful, but unsteady enough that she put herself at his side and let him take the weight he needed. Your legs work, she said. Well enough, he said. Good. Let's go. They moved out of the room and back down the corridor toward the loading door, which was the opposite direction from the front of the building, which was where Victor Royce was, which was where Jack was. The loading door was 20 feet ahead. The man who stepped out of the side passage between them and the door was not one of Royce's security people. He was not large or professionally postured or holding anything threatening. He was 61 years old with a receding hairline and expensive clothes that had somehow remained expensive looking. Despite whatever the morning had brought, he held himself with the particular stillness of a man who was accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room he entered and had not yet been in a room where that was not true. Victor Royce looked at Emily. He looked at her father. He looked at the door behind them, through which Jack and Cole and the sounds of a situation he had not fully controlled were now clearly audible. He smiled. The neon sign outside had. It was the smile of someone who had thought several steps ahead and believed he was still ahead. And it was the most frightening thing Emily had seen all night. More frightening than the highway, more frightening than the vehicles in the flat, more frightening than the unknown building interior, because this was a man who had smiled while destroying families and had never stopped smiling, and the smile was real. Emily Walker, he said. Yes, she said. Smart girl. He said it the way he had texted clever girl, which she now understood was not admiration but categorization, the way you note the capabilities of something you intend to neutralize. But here's what you don't understand yet. The 12 contacts your father built, I've been watching 8 of them for 2 years. The moment those files hit their servers, my people flagged it. The files are already being challenged. The chain of custody is already being questioned. He spread his hands in a small, contained gesture. Digital evidence without verified provenance is not evidence. It's a story, and stories can be managed. Richard Walker said he's lying. Royce looked at him with a patience that was its own form of cruelty. Richard, you've been saying that for 8 months. He's lying, her father said again, directly to Emily, not to Royce. Because the files include verification sequences I embedded in the original documents, time-stamped, server-logged, and cross-referenced to the original financial system records that still exist in 2 institutions he does not control. They are not challengeable. He knows it. He's telling you this because he wants you to hesitate. The smile on Royce's face did not disappear, but it changed a fraction, just a fraction. The adjustment of an expression when the face underneath it has just received information it did not want. Emily saw it. She looked at Royce and he looked at her, and they both knew, in the same moment, that the smile was the last performance of a man whose audience had seen behind the curtain. It's over, she said. Not triumphantly, just factually, the way you state something that does not require defense. The evidence is out. The verification sequences hold. The journalist is publishing, and she's not the only one. You sent me an address and asked me to come to you, and I came, but I didn't come the way you expected. You came with Jack Mercer's people, Royce said. I came with people who are very good at what they do, she said. You came with a plan that assumed I was alone and scared and desperate. It was 2 of those things 6 hours ago. I'm not any of them now. Royce's hand moved toward his jacket. Ryan moved faster. He was between them in one step, which was a step Emily had not fully seen him commit to, just the result of it. Ryan between her and Royce, with a presence that made the hand movement stop in the way that certain presences stop certain things through sheer unambiguous communication. Don't, Ryan said, one word. Royce's hand returned to his side. From the front of the building, a new sound, not voices, not confrontation, something else. The specific cadence of multiple people arriving with a purpose that was different from the purposes already present. Emily thought of the two calls Jack had made in the 12 minutes before they arrived, the brief and specific calls to people at a distance who were told to hold until contacted. Jack had contacted them. The sounds multiplied, organized, directed, and clearly not Royce's people. The way they moved was different. The communication patterns different. And then Emily heard a voice that had the unmistakable cadence of federal authority. The specific way federal agents identify themselves when they enter a space, which is designed to be heard and believed and complied with. Royce heard it too. He looked at the loading door. He looked at the corridor behind him. He looked at Emily Walker, who was standing beside her father with her hand near her side pocket and her backpack on her shoulders, and the expression of someone who has already done the hardest parts of the thing and is now watching the last part take care of itself. The files reached more than 12 contacts, Emily said quietly. The two calls Jack made before we arrived, one was to the journalist. One was to a federal contact that is not in your network. Clean, separate, someone your reach doesn't touch. She held his gaze. My father was building this for 3 years. He didn't leave gaps. Had. Victor Royce stood in the corridor of his own warehouse and understood, in the specific way that men who have controlled everything eventually understand their loss of it, the thing he had spent 3 years preventing had not just happened, it had happened completely, thoroughly, with the kind of comprehensiveness that left no recoverable position. The federal agents came through the front. Ryan stepped aside, keeping himself between Royce and Emily until the agents were in the corridor, and then he stepped back and let the situation proceed as it was going to proceed, which was with efficiency and without drama, because the dramatic part was already over, and what remained was procedure. Richard Walker's hand found Emily's arm, not her hand. Her arm, just above the elbow, the way you hold something you are not willing to let go of, the grip of someone who has thought about this moment for 3 years and is now inside it, and cannot fully believe the inside matches the outside. Emmy, he said, I know. She said, I'm sorry, I know. She said again. And she meant it both ways. I know you're sorry, and I know everything it cost. And both things are true. And neither one of them is the most important thing right now. And the most important thing right now is that we are both standing in this corridor, and you are holding my arm, and I am not angry. She was not angry. She had carried the anger for 3 years, had worn it like the one jacket she wore on the highway, the practical armor of someone who needed protection from the cold. She had thought the anger was hers, had thought it was a fair response to abandonment, and it had been to the story she believed. To the story she now knew was not the whole truth. The anger had a different shape, not gone, but different. The anger at being left was still there, might always be there, that was honest. But underneath it, around it, threaded through it, was something else now. She knew who her father was. She knew what he had done and why and what it had cost him. And she knew that in the calculation he had made on the worst night of his life, when he had 40 minutes to save himself and could not save her too, he had chosen to believe something about her that she had spent 3 years trying to disprove through pure endurance. Believed she was strong enough. He had been right. She looked at him, thinner, silver-haired, with a healing cut and a rough voice and hands that were marked from 8 months of zip ties, and she thought, he is here. He is alive. He was right about me and I was wrong about him, and both of those things are true, and we are both still standing. Found the flat, she said. He looked at her. I found the place, she said. First try. I remembered how you taught me to navigate by landmarks. Closed my eyes and I found it. Richard Walker's face did that thing again, the breaking thing. And this time he did not recover it into composure. He just let it stay broken, which was the bravest thing she had seen him do, and she had seen him be brave before. Good girl, he said. It was what he had said when she was 12, on that flat ground in the late afternoon light, when her 12-year-old feet had felt the slight give in the earth and she had stopped and pointed down. Good girl. She had carried that too, without knowing she was carrying it. Along with the card and the pressed wildflower and the photograph of the two of them from the summer she was 13. All the small things a father leaves in a daughter, planted in the years before he knew he would need her to grow them into something that could bear weight. She said, "We need to get you checked out medically. I'm fine. You've been held for 8 months by a man who needed you functional enough to talk but had no other incentive to treat you well. You are not fine. You are upright, which is good, but it's not the same thing as fine." He almost smiled. "You sound like me. 14 months on the road will do that," she said. Outside the building, the morning was fully established and unambiguous, real daylight, the kind that does not negotiate. She could hear the sounds of multiple vehicles and multiple conversations, the ambient noise of a situation being processed by people whose job was to process it. She could hear, somewhere in that ambient noise, Jack's voice steady giving information. The voice of a man who was accustomed to being in rooms where people needed to understand who he was and what he wasn't. Ryan appeared in the loading doorway. "We're clear," he said. "Jack wants you both outside." Emily looked at her father. He looked at her. "Ready," she said. He straightened. Not all the way. 8 months had taken something from the straightness, and she suspected it would take time to come back, and she was prepared to give it the time it needed. But he straightened as much as he could, and he put his weight on his own legs, and he nodded. They walked out together. The daylight hit them both, and she heard from somewhere to her left, Jack's voice stopped mid-sentence, and she turned to see him standing 30 feet away with a federal agent. Jack was looking at her father with an expression that was not the controlled, operational expression she had been seeing from him all night. Something rawer than that. The expression of someone who has been carrying guilt about an outcome they could not prevent for a very long time, and is now looking at evidence that the outcome was not final. He said something to the federal agent, 2 words she was too far away to hear, and then he walked toward them. Stopped in front of Richard Walker. Her father said, "You kept your promise." Jack said, "We found her." "You kept her safe." "She kept herself safe," Jack said. "We just showed up." Richard Walker looked at Emily. She looked at her father. Something passed through that look that she would carry for the rest of her life, the specific communication of 2 people who have been through the same storm from opposite sides and have arrived, probably, and at great cost, at the same dry ground. Victor Royce, 30 feet in the other direction, was being walked toward a vehicle by 2 federal agents. He was not struggling. Men like Royce, Emily thought, did not struggle physically. They had spent their entire careers building structures that meant they never needed to. Without those structures, they were just men, not large, not powerful, not frightening. Just men who had made choices, surrounded now by the consequences of those choices, which were going to be significant and long-lasting and well-documented, because her father had spent 3 years making sure they would be. She watched him get into the vehicle. She felt nothing toward him that she needed to examine. She felt about Victor Royce was simple. He was done. Whatever he had done to her family, to the families in those documents, to the veterans and the elderly homeowners, and the people who had nowhere else to turn, he was done. The machinery of that was in motion, and she had set it in motion, and that was enough. She did not need him to look at her. She did not need the acknowledgement of the man being held accountable. The accountability was its own acknowledgement. She turned away from the vehicle. Nathan was talking to a federal agent, providing information from his phone, the methodical competence of a man who had been doing exactly what was needed at exactly the right time all night. Cole was standing near his bike, which he had apparently ridden around to the building's exterior. At some point, she had not seen it happen, but there the bike was, and there Cole was, existing with his characteristic contained practicality. She looked at the 4 of them. 4 men who had not known her yesterday, who had treated her, from the moment her name registered, not as a victim who needed managing or a complication to be minimized or a resource to be used, but as a person who was part of what needed to happen, who had stood beside her, not in front of her, or rather, had stood in front when the situation called for it, and beside her when it didn't, the way you stand with someone who is capable rather than standing for someone who is not. Father's hand was still on her arm. She covered it with her own hand, just for a moment. She straightened the straps of her backpack, the backpack that had the metal container inside it, and her father's letter against her chest. And she looked at the morning, which was bright and real and moving forward the way mornings do, without consultation and without pause, simply arriving because that is what mornings do. She thought about the highway at 4 in the morning. She thought about the rule she had broken. She thought about how strange it was that the thing that had saved her father's life and hers and the lives of every family whose stolen future was now in the hands of people who could actually return it, the thing that started all of this, that set the entire chain of events in motion, had been a girl on a dark highway who couldn't make herself walk away. Not because she was reckless, not because she was naive, because she recognized something in a stranger's voice. The specific register of someone using their last breath, not to call for help for themselves, but to send someone else to safety. She had recognized it because she had been doing the same thing for 14 months, getting through each day, not for herself, but because there was something unfinished, something that she hadn't known was unfinished but had kept her moving toward it anyway. She was finished walking away. The federal agents were professional and thorough and took approximately 4 hours to process everything, which was 4 hours of statements and documentation and the specific bureaucratic machinery that grinds into motion when a case of this scale begins its formal existence. Emily gave her statement twice, once to a field agent named Torres, who had the careful, non-reactive manner of someone trained to receive information without editorializing, once to a woman named Specialist Hargrove, who was from a financial crimes division and who had clearly already seen enough of the journalist's published material to understand the shape of what she was looking at. Hargrove asked good questions. Emily answered them accurately and completely, because accuracy and completeness were what the families in those documents deserved. She was conscious of that the entire time she sat across from Hargrove in the back of a federal vehicle, with the morning light coming through the windows and her father's letter still in her jacket. Her father was being seen by a medical team in a second vehicle 20 feet away. She could see it through the window. She kept checking, not obsessively but regularly, the way you check on something that you have been worried about for long enough that the checking has become reflex and will take some time to unlearn. Miss Walker, Hargrove said. Emily pulled her attention back. I want you to understand something, Hargrove said. She was mid-40s, with the kind of directness that came from years of working cases where the people responsible for harm had managed to remain untouchable. What your father built, the verification sequences, the simultaneous distribution architecture, the documentation chain, it's extraordinary work. Professional investigators working with full institutional support would not have built something this comprehensive. She paused. He built it alone, over 3 years while being actively hunted. He's an accountant, Emily said. He understands systems. He understood that the system he was building had to be indestructible, Hargrove said. There's a difference. She looked at Emily for a moment. And what you did this morning, the decisions you made, the sequencing, the way you thought through Royce's likely responses before he made them, that's not luck. That's not adrenaline. Emily said nothing. Where did you learn to think like that? Hargrove asked. It was not an interrogative question. It was the question of someone who was genuinely curious. Emily thought about 14 months, about the highway at 4 in the morning and the cold and the $4.30 in her left boot, about the dozens of situations where the wrong decision meant no second chance to make a better one, where she had learned to read people and spaces and problems with a speed and accuracy that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with necessity. The road, she said simply. Hargrove looked at her for a moment longer, then nodded a single unhurried nod that carried more respect in it than most longer acknowledgments Emily had received in her life. When the statement was done, Emily got out of the vehicle and walked directly to the one where her father was. A medic stepped out as she approached, a young man who gave her the kind of brief professional summary that she had asked for and he had clearly given before: dehydration, mild malnutrition, contusions consistent with physical coercion at some point in the past several months, but nothing acute, blood pressure elevated but not critically. He would need follow-up care. He would need time. Can I see him, she asked. Yes, the medic said. She got in. Her father was sitting with a blanket across his lap and a blood pressure cuff being removed from his arm. He looked up when she climbed in, and his face did the thing she was starting to recognize as the expression he could not control, not the breaking thing from the warehouse, but something quieter, the look of a man who keeps being surprised that she's still there, keeps expecting her to have left, keeps having to recalibrate to the reality that she hasn't. Bad, she asked. They keep using words like manageable and treatable, he said, which I know means they're trying not to frighten me. You look better than I expected, she said honestly. I look terrible, he said, equally honestly. Better than I expected, she repeated, and something about the precision of it made his mouth twitch upward at one corner. She sat down across from him in the vehicle, both of them in the close space, and the medic quietly finished his notes and stepped out, and they were alone for the first time since she had been 12 years old, and he had taken her to a flat, uphacked earth and taught her to navigate by landmarks that did not move. The silence lasted about 10 seconds. Then her father said, 3 years. 3 years, she confirmed. Emmy, I'm not angry, she said. I want you to know that first. I was angry for a long time. She stopped, reorganized. I thought you left because I wasn't enough to stay for. Thought the note meant you'd made a decision about your life and I wasn't the direction you wanted to go. Father's jaw tightened. She watched it tighten and did not stop because this was the conversation and it needed to happen completely or it would always be incomplete. And then last night happened, she said, and I found out the truth and I sat with it for 4 hours of writing and 30 minutes of a federal statement, and somewhere in there the anger about you leaving started to change shape. Because you didn't leave. You ran. There's a difference. You ran in a direction that was away from me because that was the only direction that kept me safe. And it cost you. I could see what it cost you in your face when that door opened in the warehouse. I could see 3 years of what it cost you. She held his gaze. But I need to tell you what it cost me. Not to hurt you. Because it's true and because you taught me that the truth matters even when it's hard. Tell me, he said. His voice was quiet and steady and open, and she understood that he had been waiting for this, had been thinking about this conversation for 3 years, preparing for it, knowing it was coming, knowing it was necessary. I lost everything, she said. The apartment, the jobs, the last of what we had together. I spent 14 months with $4 in my boot and a hole in my left shoe and nowhere to go that was mine. Spent nights in places that she stopped. Some of it was very hard. Some of it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I did it believing you had decided I wasn't worth staying for. Richard Walker did not look away. That belief, she said, was almost worse than the circumstances. Because the circumstances you can fight. You can solve a problem. You can find food, find shelter, navigate from one situation to the next. But believing the person who was supposed to love you most had chosen to leave that you couldn't fight. Just sat there. I know, he said. I need you to know that I know you had reasons. Good reasons. I know that now. But I also need you to know that the reasons don't make the 3 years not have happened. I know, he said again. And this time, there was something in it beyond agreement. The weight of a man who has thought about exactly this for exactly 3 years. Who has held the knowledge of what his choice cost his daughter alongside the knowledge that the choice was the right one, and who has never been able to resolve the gap between those two things into anything that felt like peace. But here's the other thing, Emily said, and her voice changed, not softer exactly, but different the way a voice changes when it reaches the thing it was building toward. The 3 years made me someone who could do what I did last night. I think you knew that. I think when you said in that letter that you knew I was tough enough, I think you knew that what I was going through was going to make me exactly the person who could end this. I think you trusted that before you knew it was true. Father looked at her for a long moment. I didn't plan for you to suffer, he said. I know. But yes, he said, I knew you. I have always known you. From the time you were small, the way you got back up from things, the way you figured out the next move before the last one had fully failed, the way you never asked to be saved from hard things, only through them. Voice was rough and certain, trusted you with the hardest thing I had. I am sorry it was that hard. I am not sorry I trusted you with it. The words landed in her the way her father's letter had landed, not painlessly, not without cost, but truly. Landing in a place that recognized truth from the inside. Okay, she said. Okay. She straightened. We should talk about what comes next. He blinked. Then he did something she had not seen him do in so long that she had forgotten it was part of his face. He laughed. Big laugh, not a healthy laugh, a worn down, genuine, 3 years in the making laugh that sounded like relief finding its way out of a body that had been holding it too long. Right, he said. What comes next? You need medical follow-up. Real follow-up, not just a field assessment. You need somewhere to stay while that happens. She was thinking practically, because that was what she did, because the road had made that reflex permanent in a way she suspected she would eventually make peace with. I know you had an apartment. I assume that's not accessible anymore. It was not what you'd call accessible even before they took me, he said. Been living out of a bag for 3 years. Garrett's people helped. Jack's people. He paused. It was not so different from what you were doing. Emily processed this, the parallel, the uncomfortable mirror of it. Father and daughter, both on the move, both resource limited, both navigating danger with whatever they had. So we're both starting from nothing, she said. It appears so. Good, she said. That's familiar territory. He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts amusement and pain, and something she thought might be the specific pride of a parent who has taught a child something and is now watching them demonstrate it has been learned completely. Vehicle door opened. Ryan appeared. He had a coffee in each hand, gas station cups, the kind that were either terrible or life-saving depending entirely on how long it had been since you'd had one, and he held them out without comment. Emily took both and handed one to her father. Ryan looked at Richard Walker with the expression of a man who has been waiting 3 years to see someone walk out of a situation and is still recalibrating to the fact of it. Richard, he said. Ryan, her father said, you got her here. She got herself here, Ryan said. We just rode alongside. Father looked at Emily. She looked at the coffee cup in her hands. Nobody needed to add anything to that, so nobody did. Outside, the day continued its business. 2 more federal vehicles had arrived while she was giving her statement, and the organized machinery of a major investigation settling into its operational phase was audible even from inside the vehicle. Hargrove and Torres and 3 other agents were coordinating with the precision of people who had been waiting for exactly this kind of case to fully materialize, and now that it had, they were moving with the focused efficiency of people who understood that timing mattered, that the simultaneous publication across 12 outlets had created a window of public record that Royce's legal team could challenge in court but could not erase from the world. Father's 3 years of careful, comprehensive work had guaranteed that. Richard Walker was going to watch his name, cleared not through a quiet administrative reversal that nobody saw, but publicly, in the full light of a press cycle that was already accelerating, that Emily could feel accelerating even from here, even without a phone in her hand or a screen in front of her, simply from the way Hargrove was moving and the way Torres was talking into his radio and the way a 3rd federal SUV had just turned onto the access drive. This was real. This was happening. And it was not going to be undone. Jack appeared at the vehicle door 40 minutes later, finished with his own statement, and he looked the way people look after they have been through a night like this one and a morning like this one, not defeated, not depleted in any way that suggested damage, but used, the way useful things look when they have been fully and correctly used. Richard, he said. Her father stood. Steady, then he crossed the small space and put his hand on Jack. Jack put his hand on Richard's shoulder, and they stood like that for a moment without any other communication, which was the entirety of 3 years of a promise made and kept expressed in the only form that was adequate for it. Emily watched and did not look away, because this too was true and real, and she was done looking away from things. When the moment released, Jack looked at her. There's something you need to hear. What? Royce's attorney made contact 40 minutes ago, Jack said. They're already working a cooperation angle, trying to identify parts of the network he can give up in exchange for consideration. Emily's jaw tightened. It means the case expands, Jack said. The people who were insulated by Royce network, the people inside law enforcement, inside city government, the people who made things disappear, they're going to be exposed. Not just Royce, all of it. He paused. That's actually better than putting Royce away alone. Hargrove said, it's the difference between cutting off one branch and getting the roots. Emily thought about the families in the documents, about the elderly homeowners paid fractions of what their properties were worth, about the veterans steered into loan agreements designed to fail, about all the people who had lost something they could not afford to lose because the systems that were supposed to protect them had been quietly, systematically purchased by a man who smiled while he did it. She thought about what roots meant, what getting the roots meant for the people who had been living above a poison system without knowing what was underneath them. How long does it take, she asked. Cases this size years, Jack said. The financial recovery for the affected families can start moving faster than the criminal case. The assets are frozen as of this morning. The civil mechanism for recovery starts now. The families should know that, Emily said. Someone needs to tell them that directly, not through a press release, not through a lawyer's statement directly. There's a process starting that is specifically for them. Jack looked at her. That's not usually how it works. Should be how it works, she said. These people have been told by official systems for years that what happened to them was legal, was their own fault, was not something anyone could help with. The first thing they hear from an official process is another piece of paper in an envelope. They're going to file it with all the other pieces of paper that didn't help. She held his gaze. Someone needs to look them in the eye. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then, are you volunteering? Emily had not intended to say that. She had not planned it, had not been building toward it, had not known until Jack asked the question that the answer was already formed somewhere inside her and had been forming since she first heard the list of what Royce had done, since she first understood the specific cruelty of taking from people who had nowhere else to go. Yes, she said. I'm volunteering. Her father was watching her. He was leaning against the vehicle with his blanket still around his shoulders, and his eyes were the clearest they had been all morning, sharp and specific and recognizing something. That's not a small thing, Jack said carefully. I know what it takes to have nothing, Emily said. I know what it feels like when systems don't see you. I know what it takes to believe that someone is actually in your corner, because I spent 14 months finding out what it felt like when nobody was. She said it without self-pity, just with the flat accuracy of documented experience. And talk to those families in a way that means something, not because I'm a lawyer or a federal agent or someone with institutional authority, because I've been where they are. Not the same place, but close enough to the same feeling to speak it honestly. Jack looked at her for a long moment. There's a nonprofit, he said, that we've been connected with for about 4 years. Veterans advocacy, housing rights, financial fraud recovery. They've been working the margins of the Royce case for 2 years, helping affected families document their losses, trying to build a parallel record. They've been waiting for the primary evidence to break because without it, they couldn't get traction. He paused. They're going to need people. People who can do exactly what you just described. Emily felt something settle in her chest. Not the click of a mechanism, not the sharpness of a decision, something slower and more complete. The way water settles when you stop disturbing it, finding its own level. Tell me about them, she said. I will, Jack said. But first, he looked at her father, then back at her. Both of you need to eat something that isn't gas station coffee. And he looked at Richard Walker, directly need 4 more hours with a real medical team before you go anywhere. And telling him that, Emily said. I am standing right here, her father said. Both of you are going to listen to me on this one, Jack said, with a tone that was not authoritative exactly, but was completely non-negotiable. The voice of a man who had spent the night earning the right to say one unchallenged thing. And this was it. Emily and her father looked at each other. Fine, they said, at the same moment, in the same flat tone, which made Ryan, who had reappeared at the vehicle door at some point, make that sound again, the not quite law. And this time it was fuller, closer to an actual laugh, because the situation allowed it now in a way that situations earlier in the night had not. The medical team that Jack had called not the field medics, but an actual physician affiliated with a veterans support organization in Tucson, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who arrived in her own vehicle with a kit that was considerably more comprehensive than the field assessment, spent 2 hours with Richard Walker, and came out telling Emily that he was going to be all right, specifically, those specific words, in a tone that meant she was speaking to a daughter rather than to a next of kin. Emily thanked her 3 times, which was 2 more times than she typically thanked anyone for anything. And Dr. Reyes seemed to understand exactly what those extra thanks meant. Cole materialized at some point in the late morning. She was not sure exactly when, because Cole's appearances were consistently unannounced. What she was beginning to understand was simply how Cole moved through the world and stood beside her near the exterior of the building and said nothing for approximately 2 minutes, which was the longest she had been in Cole's presence, without feeling the need to fill the silence. Because the silence was not uncomfortable, it was just silence. Then he said, "Your father's going to be okay." "Yes," she said. "You did well," he said. 3 words. From a man who used words like they cost something, which meant they were offered from actual surplus rather than out of social obligation, and she received them accordingly. "Thank you," she said, "for the flat, for staying." Cole shrugged once, the minimum necessary gesture. "It's what you do," he said. She thought about that. The simplicity of it. It's what you do, not a heroic statement, not a performance of sacrifice, just the flat acknowledgement that in certain situations there are people who stay and handle things because that is the correct response to the situation, and they are the correct person to handle it. And the correctness of the match between person and moment is its own explanation. She thought, "I understand that. I have been living that for 14 months without knowing that was what it was called." The first call came 3 hours after Royce's arrest hit the news cycle. It was to Nathan's phone from the nonprofit that Jack had mentioned, the Veterans and Housing Rights Organization. They had seen the published reports. They had been contacted by 2 of the affected families who had seen the same reports and were asking what it meant for them, what they should do, who was going to help them understand what was happening and what came next. Nathan handed the phone to Emily without asking. She looked at it, looked at him. He said nothing, which was its own answer. She took the call. The voice on the other end was a woman 50s. Emily thought, maybe older, with the particular vocal quality of someone who has been through a loss that changed the timbre of everything they said afterward. She had lost her house. Not lost it the way people lost houses through their own decisions, but lost it the way the families in her father's documents had lost things systematically, deliberately, through a process designed to look legal while being anything but. She had been fighting for 2 years to be heard. She had been told 2 years' worth of variations of "there's nothing we can do." "I saw the news," the woman said. "I saw his name. Victor Royce. That's the name on my papers." "Yes," Emily said. "His name is going to be on a lot of papers now. Different kinds of papers." "Does that mean stopped? Started again? Does that mean I might get it back? My house?" Emily sat with the weight of the question. The specific, enormous, irreducible weight of it. She thought about what Jack had said: civil recovery mechanism, assets frozen, families who had lost something. She thought about what she could promise honestly versus what she wanted to promise because it was what this woman needed to hear. "Cannot promise you your specific house," Emily said. "I won't do that to you. What I can tell you honestly is that there is a legal process starting right now today, specifically for families in your situation. Assets that Royce controlled are frozen as of this morning. Civil recovery attorneys are going to be looking at every transaction he made. The documentation the documentation in the case connects Royce directly to those transactions in ways that are verified and irrefutable." She paused. "You have been heard. That is not a small thing. 2 years of not being heard, and this morning you were heard. The rest of it takes time, and it's not going to be simple, but it starts today." Silence on the other end. "Then who are you?" Emily thought about how to answer that. "Someone who knows what it's like," she said, "to need things to be true and be afraid they're not." "I'm telling you they are," the woman on the phone cried. Not dramatically, quietly, the way people cry when they have been holding something for a very long time, and something finally gives enough to let it move. Emily sat with it and did not try to fix it or redirect it, because it did not need to be fixed. Needed to be witnessed. She had learned the difference. She handled 3 more calls that afternoon, each one different, each one with its own specific shape of loss and fear and cautious, fragile hope, each one requiring her to balance complete honesty about what she could not guarantee with complete clarity about what was already true and already in motion. Between the 3rd and 4th call, her father appeared beside her. He had been released by Dr. Reyes with a list of follow-up requirements and a bottle of something and the specific instruction to sleep for 8 hours before making any major decisions. He had not slept, but he looked steadier than he had in the warehouse, steadier than he had in the vehicle, steadier in a way that had less to do with medical intervention than with the particular restorative effect of being outside, breathing air that was not the air of captivity, of watching his daughter do exactly what he had known she would do when she was old enough and strong enough to do it. How many calls, he asked. 4, she said. Jack says the nonprofit has a backlog of about 40 families in the documentation who they haven't been able to reach with meaningful updates because there was nothing meaningful to update them with until today. 40 families, her father said, 40 families. It was quiet for a moment. You're going to call all of them. It was not a question. Yes, she said, not today. No. Today I'm going to do what Jack said and eat something real and let you sleep for 8 hours. He looked at her. I am going to do exactly what you said, she said, and then tomorrow I am going to call all 40 families. And then I am going to talk to the nonprofit about what they need and how I can be useful. Then we are going to figure out where you and I are going to be while your name gets cleared and the case moves forward. That's a lot of plans, he said. You taught me to have backup plans, she said. Those are just the first tier. He almost smiled. I also taught you to eat when you have the chance. You did. Then let's go, he said. They ate at a diner that Jack knew, 20 minutes from the warehouse property, which was the kind of diner that had been in the same location for 30 years and had the menu to prove it. Emily ordered the kind of food she had been thinking about, on and off for 14 months, the specific, unglamorous, entirely satisfying kind of food that tastes best when it follows a long period of not having it. Eggs, toast, hash browns, coffee that was better than gas station coffee, though not by a margin that warranted discussion. All 5 of them ate, Jack and Ryan and Nathan and Cole and Emily and her father, at a table that was too small for 6 and managed anyway, the way tables manage when the people at them are willing to make it work. Cole ate with the same focused efficiency with which he apparently did everything. Nathan had his phone out, but was not looking at it, which felt like a significant statement from Nathan. Ryan told a story about a previous situation involving a particularly badly lit county road and a misread map that made Richard Walker laugh for the first time since Emily had found him, and the sound of her father laughing, worn and real and completely genuine, was the best thing she had heard in 3 years. She filed it away, not against future, need not the way she had been filing things away for 14 months, cataloging resources and advantages and escape routes, just filing it as something that had happened and was worth keeping. Father laughing at a table with 5 people, 3 hours after he had walked out of a warehouse where he had been held for 8 months, scrambled eggs in front of him, and the morning news on the television above the counter, showing a crawler that said, Developer Royce faces federal charges in multi-state fraud investigation. Television in the diner showed Royce being walked toward a vehicle. Different footage than what she had seen in real life that morning. Someone's phone footage, slightly blurry, caught from across a parking lot. But real, publicly, irrevocably real. Her father glanced at the television, looked at his eggs, looked at Emily. Strange, he said quietly, just to her. What is? Watching it on a screen, he said. 3 years it was just mine to carry, just a thing I knew that nobody could see. And now it's on television in a diner. Does that feel? She asked. He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything, without rushing to the comfortable answer. Like something heavy being put down, he said, and a little like not being sure what your hands do next when you've been carrying something for that long. She understood that precisely. She had been understanding it from the moment she had walked out of the warehouse and was no longer moving toward something, no longer in a situation that required every resource she had, and her body had briefly not known what to do with itself. Figure it out, she said. What your hands do next. Takes a little time, but you figure it out. He looked at her. I did, she said. Not bravado, just fact. The testimony of someone who had been exactly where he was describing and had come through the other side of it with her hands full of something useful. The twist came, as the significant ones always did, quietly and without announcement. Nathan's phone, which he had finally put down, buzzed once. He looked at it. His expression did not change outwardly, But Emily had spent enough of the night watching Nathan to know that the absence of change in Nathan's expression was itself information. "What?" she said. He turned the phone toward her. A text from Hargrove, the federal agent. 4 lines of formal, precise language that said, in the manner of someone who communicated primarily an understatement, that in the process of executing search warrants on Royce's properties this morning, agents had discovered financial records indicating that certain assets, specifically a portfolio of properties that Royce had acquired in the past 3 years, through the mechanisms documented in Richard Walker's evidence, were still held in structures that could be legally returned to original owners. Not all of them, not most of them, but some. And the specific properties listed in the first tranche of returnable assets included documentation that Hargrove wanted Emily's father to review as a matter of priority. Emily read it twice. She handed the phone to her father. She watched his face as he read. Watched him read it a second time more slowly. Watched him set the phone down on the table and look at the television where the crawler was still running, and then look at his hands, and then look at her. "There are families," he said, "who are going to get something back." "Yes," she said, "real, material, actual something." "Yes." He pressed his lips together. His jaw worked once. He looked at the ceiling of the diner for 2 seconds with the expression of a man doing the internal work that cannot be done in front of other people, but sometimes has to be started in front of them anyway. Then he looked back down and picked up his fork. "Good," he said, one word. The same way Cole said things, with the complete weight of what was behind it, carried in the simplicity of what was in front of it. Emily picked up her own fork. They ate. Later late afternoon, the light different, the urgency metabolized into something that lived at a lower register but was not gone. Emily found herself standing outside the diner with Ryan. The others were still at the table. Her father had finally agreed to close his eyes in the back of Jack's vehicle while Jack made calls, and she had watched him fall asleep in approximately 90 seconds, which was what 8 months of captivity and 1 morning of freedom looked like metabolically, and she had looked at his sleeping face and thought, "He is safe. He is here. He is going to be okay." Ryan was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, looking at the road. "You saved his life," Emily said. "When you got him out 3 years ago." "We got him out," Ryan said. "And then we lost him 8 months ago." "Those 2 things are both true." "You kept looking," she said. "Wasn't enough," he said. And the flatness was not self-pity. It was the honest accounting of someone who held himself to a standard and knew when he had fallen short of it. "It was enough," Emily said, "because when it mattered, when tonight happened, you were there. All of you. You were exactly where you needed to be." Ryan looked at her sideways. "Your dad said you were stubborn. He also said he was proud of it." "He was right on both counts," Ryan said. "And then after a moment, what happens to you now? Practically, where do you go?" She had been thinking about it, not with the survival mode urgency of where do I sleep tonight, but with the slower, more unfamiliar thinking of someone who suddenly has something like a future to consider, not just the next day, not just the next situation, but something with duration and direction and the possibility of choosing rather than just responding. "The nonprofit," she said. "Jack talked to them this afternoon while we were eating. They want to bring me in formally, not as a paid position yet. They don't have the budget for it yet, but as a recovery advocate, someone who works directly with the affected families, helps them understand the process, connects them to the legal resources, sits with them through the parts that are confusing and frightening." She paused. "It's not much in terms of material stability, but," Ryan said, "but I've been operating on not much in terms of material stability for 14 months, she said. "The difference is that before, I was operating on it alone and moving away from things. Now I'd be operating on it with people and moving towards something." She looked at the road. "That's not a small difference." "No," Ryan agreed. "It's not. And my father, he has skills that the nonprofit could use too. He understands the financial structures Royce used better than anyone. He can help the families understand exactly how they were targeted and exactly what the recovery mechanism looks like from the inside of the documentation." She paused. "He's going to need something to do. Something that uses what he knows. Sitting in a room not doing anything is going to be harder for him than anything Royce did." Ryan looked at her. "You've already figured all of this out." "I've had a long day," she said. He laughed. Actually laughed. full and real, and she found herself smiling back, which was a thing she had not done reflexively in 14 months. The smile that came without being constructed, the smile that arrived because something was funny, and her face knew it before she did. Jack's going to want to stay involved, Ryan said, in whatever you do next. He won't say it, he's not built to say it, but he will be there. All of us will. I know, she said. Does that bother you? She thought about it honestly. 3 months ago, yes, she said. I would have said I don't need people. I handle things myself. I'm better off without the complication of relying on anyone. She paused. Tonight, I cut a man's zip ties with a folding knife at 4 in the morning and rode 400 miles on the back of a motorcycle and dug evidence out of the desert and walked into a warehouse where my father was being held by a man who had 3 states worth of corruption working for him. She looked at Ryan. Didn't do any of that alone. And the not alone part was not a weakness. It was why it worked. Ryan nodded slowly. So no, she said. Doesn't bother me. The sun was past its high point, angling toward the horizon, doing what Arizona suns did in the late afternoon, becoming amber and specific, the kind of light that found surfaces and made them true. Emily Walker stood in that light and felt it on her face and thought about a flat of packed earth outside the city where her father had once brought her in this same kind of light and said something about some days being worth marking. This day was worth marking. Not because it ended cleanly or painlessly or without cost, it hadn't. Not because everything was fixed, because it wasn't, because the case would take years, and the families would take longer than that to fully recover. And her father still had months of physical and psychological work ahead of him, and she herself had 14 months of things she had not yet been still enough to process. None of it was clean, but it was real, it was forward. She went back inside. Her father was still sleeping in the vehicle. The others were at the table, a second round of coffee in progress. Cole apparently having agreed to a slice of pie, which Nathan was documenting with his phone in what she suspected was the driest humor she had ever witnessed in real time. Jack was on a call, his voice low and steady, doing the administrative work of a night like this one that continued long after the active part was over. She poured herself another coffee and sat down. She thought about what Ryan had said. What happens to you now? She thought about 40 families waiting for a call that meant something. She thought about her father's voice saying, I am not sorry I fought. She thought about Cole saying it's what you do and the truth in the simplicity of it. She thought about a girl on a highway at 4 in the morning with $4 in her boot and one rule she had kept until she couldn't. And she thought about what had happened because she couldn't keep it. She thought survival was the first chapter. She had been living in it for 14 months, had been fully, completely, exhaustingly in it, the chapter where the only goal is the next day, where the only currency is endurance, where the only skill that matters is the one that gets you through the next hour. She had been good at it, better than most people would have been. She had learned things in it that she would carry for the rest of her life. But it was the first chapter, not the only one. What came after survival was something she was going to have to learn the way she had learned everything else in the past 14 months, by doing it, by being in it, by making mistakes and correcting them and moving forward on the information available rather than waiting for certainty that was never going to come anyway. What came after survival was living. She had not known until approximately 4 in the morning on a cold Arizona highway and turned toward a man with his hands tied behind his back that she was already ready for it. That every hard mile, every cold night, every impossible morning, every decision she had made and carried alone, she had been building toward this. Not toward the specific night, not toward Victor Royce and the warehouse and the federal agents and the 12 contacts and her father's letter against her chest. Toward herself, toward the person who could stand in the middle of all of that and think clearly and feel fully and hold other people up while she was still finding her own footing. Toward the person her father had always known she would become. The coffee was decent. The diner was warm. Outside, the Arizona light was doing what it always did at this hour, turning everything it touched the color of something worth keeping. Emily Walker sat at a table with 4 men who had not known her yesterday and had changed everything today, and she did not feel like someone who had nothing. She felt like someone who was just beginning to understand what she had. Not because the hard things were over, they were not over, and she was honest enough to know that. Not because she had been rescued. She had not been rescued. She had walked into the hardest thing she had ever done and walked back out the other side. Because she had found, on the other side of 14 months of surviving alone, the thing that survival alone could never give you. People who looked at what she had been through and saw not damage but proof, not fragility but evidence of what she was built from. She had been invisible for 14 months. Not anymore. The story of Emily Walker did not end on a highway in the dark, did not end in a desert flat with a shovel in her hands, did not end in a warehouse corridor or a federal statement or a diner booth with decent coffee and hash browns. It started there. It started in all of those places at once. The way the real ones always start, not with a single beginning, but with the accumulated weight of everything that had to happen first, pressing forward into something that finally unmistakably had a direction. She put down the coffee cup. She picked up her phone. She had 40 families to call, and she was not afraid of a single one of them.